Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video.
Harry's day wasn't finished. He immediately went to the holding cell that had been created specifically with Thanos in mind. It was reinforced with magic adamantium, some Uru bars that Eitri donated under the condition that they be returned, and finally, when it was closed with Thanos inside, it was put out of phase. Only Harry would be able to retrieve or move him. They had considered vibranium, but decided against it since it would resist the magic that kept the cell and Thanos out of phase. Then he went to the medical center and spent 4 hours working on the injured. They were all safely in stasis, but that didn't make it any easier on Harry. He'd known there would be injuries and casualties, but he still felt responsible. He worked on the most injured first, and they almost ran out of their meager supply of Phoenix tears. But by the time he was finished, he was assured that the medical staff and Dr. Lovegood, as they'd nicknamed Luna, could handle the rest. She'd wanted to be called a healer, but that simply didn't fly. She knew some things that set her a couple of steps above their most qualified doctors with what she could heal. She wasn't even a qualified mediwitch. Definitely more qualified than Harry, even though he made up for lack of knowledge with application of way more power. He was also very pleased to hear Hela had recovered, after Fawkes had appeared to give her some of his tears, and Luna had assisted with her own magic. It had been a close thing though, and he was glad to hear she was a model patient under May's care now. She would be released in a couple of hours after the Phoenix tears had finished what they were doing. When he was done with that, he went to speak with Fury to get the butcher's bill. Agent Potter. Fury greeted him. "Give me a number, Fury." Harry said. Fury didn't like being spoken to like that, but considering what Harry had just been through, he relented. "Just over 300 dead." Harry looked up sharply. "Really?" he asked. He would have thought it would be a much higher number. "Yes, really," Fury said. "What did you expect would happen with how you set up redundant backups for emergency extractions?" "But I saw so many get hurt," Harry asked with some relief but wondering how it was possible. Luna and Fawkes were already fixing people when they started showing up. I suspect they were both pushing themselves. But the battle lasted only roughly 20 minutes and we were prepared for twice the size of the army that Thanos brought. As it is, there will be a few people with artificial limbs, but with what we have, they won't even notice the difference. Fury informed him, then he put a hand on Harry's shoulder. "You did really well, Harry. Without you and what you bring, I don't even know that we would have won." Harry had closed his eyes in relief and was slightly shocked when he felt Natasha take his hand. She had yet to leave his side, but he was in such a rush to save as many as he could and to find out what this war had cost that he had actually forgotten she was there for a while. He turned instantly and hugged her tight. "It's finally over, Nat." "Not quite," Fury interrupted. "We still need to discuss what we're going to do with those stones." "That's not a problem," Harry said after a while. He just wanted a moment, but he knew Fury needed answers. "While they are with me, nobody can use them, not even I can. Nobody can get into his pouch either, not while he's alive." Natasha said. "So in a couple of 1,000 years when you die?" Fury asked. "Won't happen." Harry said. "We can discuss that another time. For now, it stays between us, okay?" Fury hadn't known that, but he decided to ask later. He knew Harry had never been in this kind of battle, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of enemies he had set ablaze with what Harry himself had admitted was a dark spell, even if they were already dead. He knew he would need a break and possibly counseling. Who better than his family on an island where he rested best? Fury intended to take some R&R as well as soon as he could, but he still had work to do before that. Harry still needed to go speak to their different allies, so he decided to get that sorted first before going to Asgard, where there was most likely already a party going. Loki had already left to go join them. First, he went to go check on Magneto again. "Mr. Potter," Eric said from his bed, where he was told to stay for a couple of hours while they confirmed he was stable. "Please tell your people that I'm capable of leaving." Harry sent a spell at him to confirm and could find nothing wrong with him, but May Parker appeared by his side before he could say anything. "Mr. Laneshare is to stay in his bed until he is cleared, and he knows that, don't you, Mr. Laneshare?" she asked dangerously. "You're not trying to go over my head now, are you?" Harry lifted his hands in defeat. "This is your ward, May. I wouldn't dream of contradicting you." Eric looked between the two of them in confusion, but then finally gave it up. "Fine," he grumbled. "Can you at least tell me what happened?" he asked. He had not expected to get blown away, especially while he was invisible. "After you were knocked out, Quicksilver, who I'm told you may know, cut off both his arms while Captain Marvel distracted him. After that, it was a simple thing to get the gauntlet and secure it," Harry said. "And his army?" Eric asked. "Rocket from the Guardians of the Galaxy used a micro-black hole to dispatch the remaining army after our allies withdrew, and then Harry burned the corpses to dust with a spell," Natasha said for him. "A single spell?" Eric asked with big eyes. "Demonic fire. Doesn't stop burning until it's eaten its target completely," Natasha said. Harry never liked talking about using such dark spells. He had to wait till Thanos was not in possession of the stones, though, since they counter each other's power. Eric was quiet then. Such power this young man held, it was a shame he couldn't be swayed. "Oh well." After a couple of moments of thought, he asked, "Would you say that I have fulfilled the requirements of my promise to assist?" Harry nodded easily. "You have, and I'll start making time to come to your island to start helping the Enhanced there." Natasha smirked. "He would have done that anyway, but thanks to your assistance and involvement, you have secured for yourself a big part of history in the protection of all sentient life throughout the universe," Harry said quickly. "This is a big step in the right direction and will help the plight of Enhanced everywhere on the planet. You couldn't buy such publicity." "He's right," Natasha continued. "If you play your cards right, you may be one of the people who finally unite humans and enhance the world over one day." Eric was quiet then as he considered their words. Finally, a small smile appeared on his face. "You really are just trying to help everyone you can, aren't you?" "It's what he does," Natasha said proudly. "Don't think for a moment that your contribution wasn't a large one," Harry said. "We needed that cuff on him to distract him while we put things in motion, and he was wonderfully distracted and powerless at just the right time." They finished their conversation and left a portkey for Eric to take home with May. He was still not happy about being treated like a child, but after Harry had backed off from May, Eric didn't push her anymore. Now he was trying to be charming to get her to release him. It didn't help him, but it made May's life a little easier. Next, Harry went to the X-Men, who were already back at the Institute. Not one of them had been injured, and when Jean realized they were using magic to heal the injured, she had decided not to offer her help, but she had stayed for a while to observe and had decided that she would like Harry to set them up with some of what she'd seen, or at least give them access to EPI's medical facilities. "Harry," one of the teens shouted when he walked into the cafeteria, where Charles was answering questions about the battle. Even though he refused to share his memory of the events since there was much death and gore, Quicksilver instantly returned Urubane, which he had held on to and had been showing off to the kids. Harry was glad to note he had at least cleaned it up first. "Hey there, kiddos," Harry greeted when they all cheered at his entry. "Did you really defeat him?" one of the kids shouted out. "Actually, I was there as backup only. The other heroes did all the work," Harry said modestly. "Until you burned half his army away with one spell." Pietro chuckled under his breath. That didn't stop one of the enhanced kids to hear it and started whispering to inform his friends. Did you have to say that? They were mostly all dead anyway. Harry said. Pietro smiled unrepentantly. If you were alone, I have no doubt you'd still have one. Pietro said. That would defeat the point though, wouldn't it? Natasha asked. The next bad guy that decides to bring a fight will have to consider that, while Harry could defeat them easily. He didn't need to raise a finger to defend our world. His first plan was to fight Thanos and his armies alone. Nobody would listen to me, Harry complained. It would have been so much easier. His powers don't work on me and I could handle his armies. Hell, Hela could have handled his entire army on her own. Same problem, love, Natasha said. We needed to prove that we could handle it. We can't expect you to fight all our battles for us. And your friends would never allow you to fight alone. Charles said from where he stood at the front of the cafeteria. That's just what happens when you make friends and allies on every planet you visit. Scott said with a smile. That's right. Natasha said, I hear Nova Prime is trying to convince Fury to get the Council of Earth to join their alliance of planets. Fury isn't sure they are ready. He wants all the countries of the planet on the council first. That'll never happen, Pietro scoffed. I think he knows that. Natasha said, perhaps he simply has hope for the future. Charles offered, I have no doubt that EPI can make a difference in any country. In a couple of years the Council of Earth may have representatives from everywhere on the planet. We don't overthrow dictatorships. Harry said, we help the people though, so with enough time, he trailed off. Maybe the people of the planet will start helping themselves. He finished in his head. With his visit complete, Harry transported them to the lunar base, where he knew the Guardians had been given permanent, comfortable quarters. For all the help they had given S.W.O.R.D. over the last 2 years. He found them in their common room, where they were gathered around their private bar, drinking a few drinks and toasting to the impending death of the Mad Titan. Nebula and Gamora had wanted to kill him the moment they could, but they trusted Harry and he had informed them of the protections on his cell. There was no doubt he would be sentenced to death. They had only requested front row seats. Hi guys, Harry called. Harry, all of them cheered. Come join us for a drink, Peter invited. Sorry guys, Harry apologized. We're just making the rounds. Natasha said, we'll probably end up on New Asgard for a celebration with our family. Natasha still felt a thrill at saying that. She had a family. If they are fine with it, I'll open a portal for you to join us, Harry said. Then he looked at Rocket. If you're really nice, I'm sure Odin will allow you a sip of his Odin's brew. I've been wanting to try that. Rocket said with interest, I hear it tastes like magic, so I've been told. Harry said, it's too strong for me to really enjoy. Then he looked at Rocket with a serious look. We're going to have to talk about that stunt with the black hole at some point. Sorry, Harry, I can't do that, Rocket said with a smile. Fury already contracted that information away. I'm not allowed to play with singularities anymore either. Harry was both shocked and not surprised. He could understand Fury jumping on it instantly, but was surprised Rocket had willingly signed the contract. Why? He asked with narrowed eyes. He thinks that I'll do something stupid, like kill everyone on Earth while I experiment, or that someone will get one of my weapons. I don't understand it myself. Singularities have been properly studied, and I know enough not to make mistakes, but I can understand that the idea scares your feeble human minds. Rocket joked. Harry had a calculating look on his face. That wasn't a black hole, was it? He asked in realization. Rocket smiled and took a sip of his drink. You know what? Let's just say I believe you and then ask you very, very nicely to not play with whatever that was again. Rocket still didn't answer, but winked at him very openly. Let's go before he decides to say something that will scar us for life, Natasha suggested. Rocket was seriously scary sometimes. It was also the reason why Harry didn't trust him with his own supersized MSC shell. He'd probably blow it up to see what happens. Not even Harry knew what that would do. They next stopped at the Baxter building. Ben, Alicia, Sue, and Reed were comfortably seated while they discussed what Reed had learned from the ship. Apparently, he had downloaded their entire database before the ship was destroyed. When Harry and Natasha turned up, they were greeted with grins all around, and they were told that Johnny had gone on a date. Apparently, battle got him all revved up. It's fascinating, really, Reed was saying, continuing his discussion on what he had found. Their ship had the full schematics and explanation on how the jump points worked. I'll be able to use the technology to increase our own space capabilities. You haven't been in contact with EPI's Space Exploration Division, have you? Natasha asked. When Reed shook his head, Harry explained. We incorporated space expansion runes with telescopes and enabled our ships with portals to go where they see. We'll be starting a new space program as early as next year, and instant travel to anywhere you can imagine will become quite possible with just a little bit of transit time for initial voyages. Really? Who do you have leading the program? Reed asked. Have you heard of Jane Foster? Harry asked. Wasn't that Thor's girlfriend? Ben asked. He was an astronaut and he had heard some things. They broke up. Natasha said. Don't mention it to him, he's still touchy about it. Anyway, she was still studying the Bifrost when the convergence happened. She's now working on creating the same portals as I do with technology. Until then, we've hired her as our mission control director for deep space exploration. She's really excited, Harry said. Just imagine what we can learn, Reed said, getting a far-off look in his eyes. I think you've learned enough for one day, Sue said with a smile. Then she turned to Harry. Where's the party? She asked, knowing there would be a celebration somewhere. We're thinking New Asgard will have the biggest party, but we need permission to invite people. Harry apologized, like they will say no to you. Ben laughed. We'll get dressed and be ready for a portal. He promised. Harry chuckled, conceding the point. After all, if New Asgard didn't want the guests, he could certainly throw his own party. Next they went to Xandar. Harry had had to stop by the base to pick up the still comatose form of Thanos. He was surprised to see his arms had started growing back. It was kind of gross with how they looked like baby arms sticking out the sides of his body. He shuddered and opened a portal. A whole regiment of magic ops troopers, geared up to the teeth with weapons, escorted the special holding cell Thanos was in, and it had been agreed that they would not leave the prisoner until they were relieved by another unit from EPI. When they arrived at the designated landing spot by the ruined building of the Nova Corps HQ, Harry winced. He knew he had forgotten something. He spent the next hour focusing his magic on reconstructing the building with a constant application of repairing spells. Natasha made a note that he make a reparo spell shell for the magic ops. He really shouldn't need to do this on his own. His time was more valuable than that, even if it was invaluable to the Nova Corps. That didn't stop him now, and by the end of the hour everything was up and running again. Harry was surprised their technology was all in working order as well, but Nova Prime, when she arrived and was shocked to see their HQ was standing again, informed him that Rocket had asked them a small premium, hefty sum, to inscribe runes on everything to negate magical malfunction. Harry didn't understand how he had fixed the building with those in place, until he was given an example of the rune and discovered he had modified it much like Tony had to allow magical repair without causing interference with the functioning of the individual parts, like on his nanite suit. Thanos was soon delivered to a secure holding cell on which Harry placed 2 separate Fidelius spells. Thanos couldn't get out, and only designated and contracted people would be allowed to see in. They were congratulated on a well-earned victory, and Harry was annoyed to note everyone was now saluting him, much as everyone at EPI did. He'd get fury for that one day. They left after confirming everything was running smoothly and that the injured troops they had were being well taken care of. They also found out the date of the trial for Thanos. Apparently the Nova Corps were bringing representatives of some of the worlds Thanos had already culled, so that they could see justice served and report back to their people. Harry thought it was a good plan. Their next stop was Wakanda. The celebration was already in full swing, and Harry found T'Challa animatedly talking to M'Baku about their respective parts in the battle. They hadn't been spotted, and Harry walked up to them quietly. The Dora Milaje let Harry through with nods when he approached, and he stepped up behind the chatting pair. "Couldn't wait to be injured, could you?" Harry asked M'Baku, who turned quickly with a look of alarm only to sigh in relief when he realized it was Harry. "You are too quiet," M'Baku complained even as he smiled at Harry. "You are too loud." T'Challa joked at M'Baku. Then he took Harry's hand and shook it. "You did really well, King Harry. Congratulations and thank you. I didn't do as much as you." Harry objected. Natasha didn't say anything. She just rolled her eyes and shook her head when T'Challa looked at her in question. M'Baku, however, responded, "You just defeated a man with infinite power with your own strengths. Tales of our victory will be sung by our people for generations. One day when my spirit dwells in the armband of Hanuman, I will tell my descendants of you still." He promised. "As will I," T'Challa agreed. "Our tribes see you as a wise man and a high priest. To not learn from you would bring shame to our ancestors." "Well, I did have many smart people discussing what needed to be done. I just followed their plan and it worked." Harry said. "That's enough." Natasha interrupted. "You're never the one that did most the work, Harry. We know you like to believe that, but it's simply not true, and if I have to listen to you putting your own part in the battle down one more time, I'll hit you," she said exasperatedly. "Sorry," Harry said, feeling thoroughly chastised. He knew his power had a large impact, but he didn't want to take credit for all the death that happened. He was still certain he could have handled the whole situation on his own. He realized it wouldn't help Earth in the long run, but still, it felt like too many were lost, even if their fatalities were fairly low, considering the size of the opposing army. "Your woman is a good suit for you," M'Baku said. "She knows when to put you in your place. With a strong woman like that, you will have strong children to make your kingdom proud." "Not you two," Harry complained. "Why is everyone pressing for us to have children? We'll start having children when we are good and ready. Making heirs for your kingdom is the duty of a king," T'Challa said. "And when you have many, maybe one of mine can marry one of yours. It can only make our kingdom stronger." "Who says you will be king when they have children?" M'Baku asked, but with a bit of humor. "When the time comes, their children will have their pick from my own. When I sit on the throne," he boasted. "We'll see," T'Challa said with a tolerant smile. Harry and Natasha greeted a few of their friends but soon left when they had confirmed that everyone seemed in good spirit and everyone was okay. Next they appeared at Avengers Manor for their last stop before New Asgard. Nobody was there, but there was a note on the table, telling Harry to hurry up and join the party on New Asgard. He chuckled and apparated them to the island. "For a change of clothing first." From there they took a carpet to the floating city of New Asgard. The island had been suspiciously quiet. When they passed Heimdall still at his post, he smiled and got onto the carpet when he was invited. He now had a permanent portkey to and from his post, but he had apparently been waiting for Harry and Natasha. He directed them to the plaza as every single citizen of Asgard had been invited to the festivities. When they approached, an enormous cheer broke out as people clapped their hands and hailed the man who had led them to victory, even as Thor had led the Asgardians. People thought of Harry as the general that had stood in the back and made the sacrifice of not engaging in the battle to ensure their victory. A noble sacrifice. When Harry landed, before he was engulfed by a hug from his mother, he noted some nymphs and elves mixed in with the crowd. Even Luna was chatting happily with Loki, while her personal guard of elves stood nearby and watched them like hawks. "Oh, Harry," Frigga said as she hugged the stuffing out of him. "You make us so proud," she said. "Indeed," Odin said over her shoulder. "The battle was well fought and I enjoyed seeing Thanos so thoroughly beaten." "Loki?" Harry asked. "Indeed," Odin said. "He's been showing any and all the memory on that magical tablet of his. He must have borrowed mine." Harry said, "I have yet to give him one." He glared over to Loki, who had the sense to smile at him nervously, knowing what they were talking about because all of them were looking at him. "Don't be upset with him," Frigga insisted. "He was very proud to tell people that he was there by your side protecting you and your lady while you kept abreast of everything that was going on. He did his family proud." Odin agreed, and he wielded Gungnir with finesse and restraint. "I could not be prouder of all my sons and daughters this day." "Thank you, Father," Hela said as she approached them. "It has been a while, but I find it still warms my heart to hear those words despite myself. Especially with the man you have become." "My daughter," Odin said with a sad look on his face. "I can never apologize enough for the way you were treated. Had it not been for your youngest brother, I would have probably never seen the error in my ways." "You are forgiven, Father," Hela said after a moment. It seemed like it had taken her a moment to gather the strength to say it. But her face softened and her shoulders sagged as if a great weight had been lifted. "Rejoice!" Odin yelled suddenly as he grabbed her in a tight hug. She stiffened instantly but relaxed after a moment. "For the sons and daughters of Asgard have all returned home." Odin was openly weeping in a display of heartfelt gratitude, and the cheers that erupted from the assembled guests were both for the display of emotion as it was for the cheer from Odin. Many ladies were also crying at the display and their men were soon hugging them too, as they all felt the emotion that was suddenly so overwhelming. None had apparently noticed as Fox appeared and broadcast the emotions so that they could all feel what Odin and his daughter finally reconciled were feeling. When the hug broke, Hela turned to walk away but Frigga caught her arm. "Please stay, we want you here, we are your family," she implored. Hela made a movement that looked suspiciously like she was wiping tears before turning and rejoining them. She didn't speak, but the small smile on her face was enough to ensure to Frigga that she had done the right thing. Odin took his own bottle and poured a drink for his daughter, who took it graciously with a nod and took a sip. It was Odin's brew, the finest Odin could offer, and she had yet to taste its like. She thoroughly enjoyed the drink, and was soon enjoying the company as Thor and Loki told of their parts in the battle. Harry had asked if he could invite some of his friends from the battle, and Thor didn't even need to ask who. He simply asked him why they weren't there yet and laughed when Harry looked at him strangely. Soon the Fantastic Four and the X-Men joined. T'Challa had politely declined though, wanting to stay with his people while they feasted as well. Eitri and the dwarves easily agreed as well. Harry hadn't wanted them in the battle, since he considered them an endangered species, due to the fact that there was little more than 300 of them. The Nova Corps were busy re-establishing contact with every system in their headquarters and declined politely. Harry had had to make a portal so that they could retrieve some alcohol that worked for mere mortal men, but it was hardly a hardship. When Tony walked up to Harry and whispered something in his ear, he smiled broadly and nodded. They soon left and returned with Harry levitating many large, heavy kegs in front of himself. "What's this?" Odin asked. Harry cast around quickly as if to ensure that nobody could hear and whispered, "Thor's addition to my elemental line of alcohol." "Truly," Odin whispered far too loudly for Harry's comfort. Yes, Harry said as he grinned despite himself. It's an ale. Harry tapped one and poured a large drink into a quart glass. Odin knew how this normally worked, so he stood in front, and as people noticed him, they grew quiet. Once there was silence. Odin spoke up, "Asgard and guests, welcome to the feast." Many people cheered, but most were silently looking at Odin and the glass of dark amber liquid in his hand. All of them knew ale when they saw it. For many years now, Prince Harry has introduced us to his creations of magical drink, and he has once again striven to bring us another sample of his ingenuity. I must, however, before he corrects me again, point out that all of these drinks were created in collaboration with his friends Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, who join us today for its unveiling. Would you please stand up and be recognized? Odin asked, and the two mentioned walked up to the front to be seen. Indeed, they have recreated the marvel of fire whiskey and Odin's brew, a drink of fire and calm, and strove to create Loki's breath. A drink that cools your body and helps counter the fatigue a day of training and labor leaves you with. Furthermore, they created Frigga's Embrace, a drink that brings the feeling of home and welcome, with a gentle breeze to welcome you. Now, I have yet to taste this drink, an ale called Thor's Feast, which I'm told would represent Thor in Harry's never-ending quest to represent his family and the elements which I agree suits them best. If my guess is correct, this will represent Earth to finish out the 4 elements, along with fire, water, and air. At Harry's nod, Odin continued, "Indeed, let us not tarry and taste this drink." Odin lifted it to his face and smelled the brew. It smelled sweet with a hint of fruit. He then brought it to his lips and took a drink. The crowd was silent as they awaited the verdict. Odin took a moment and a rumble was heard from his stomach before a large belch escaped his lips, while his eyes widened as the rumble ended. Those closest to Odin had looked to their feet as they had apparently felt the rumble coming from there. When they looked up, Odin was smiling. "Success!" he cried to the approval and cheering from all those gathered. "It is a flavorful and robust drink which leaves me feeling quite merry and strong enough for even an Asgardian to appreciate. Beware though, for not giving offense to your ladies as the drink settles in your stomach, for it seems it might have consequences to their frail hearing." He laughed and looked at Harry, feeling quite cheerful. As the crowd of people followed Thor to where he was first in line to try the Thor's Feast, Odin turned to Harry. "So Odin, calm with fire, Loki, cool and refreshing, Frigga, welcome and breezy, and Thor, strong and cheerful. It's what I think suits you best." Harry shrugged. "Though to be honest, I was struggling with the ale. It uses a completely different method to produce, and we needed to experiment with things that would best represent Thor. This one does not create any effects that can be used in conjunction with the other elements represented. I think you were quite successful in your attempt, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the feeling of this merry drink." Odin complimented. Though the belch may be a bit much, he reprimanded lightly. "Actually, the ale doesn't have a magical effect that makes you belch. That's just the ale's natural carbonation." Harry chuckled. Odin wasn't amused, but he was still quite cheerful thanks to the drink. "Let's not tell your mother that then," Odin whispered conspiratorially. "Too late," Natasha said from Harry's side, looking next to Odin where Frigga was standing. "I shall endeavor to forget that you were encouraging our son to lie to me," Frigga said with a bit of humor as she took the glass from Odin's hand and tasted the drink for herself. The rumble did occur again. "My word," she exclaimed, holding a hand over her stomach. "The rumbling, however, is part of the magic," Harry said with a bit of a smirk. "You can't have Earth unrepresented, and what is better than an earthquake?" Frigga quickly handed the drink back to Odin even as she tried to hide her smile. "Such an unrefined drink for women at least," She allowed. I don't know, Natasha said. I've tried some of their first attempts and find it goes down well after a meal. Gives the stomach less to rumble about and it goes down smoothly. I kind of enjoy it. She then turned to Harry and asked, "What will you call the normal one? To sell on Earth?" Harry asked. When Natasha nodded, he said, "We were just going to call it SPB Dark Ale. I don't know that it needs another name. The magical ingredients are still unique and the flavor will still be incomparable. We'll start raking it in with this." Tony added, "We ended up having to set up an entire brewery for it, with contracted individuals and a special section just for the Asgardian variety. But I'm thinking people will be wanting a taste." Tony then chuckled. "I hear some triad boss wanted the entire first shipment and offered quite a bit of money. He'll receive the first shipment, but then when he sees the price we're selling the stuff at, he'll start complaining." "Won't that put your lives in danger?" Loki asked with a bit of a mischievous smile. "Surely he'll see it as a slight on himself and send assassins. We're already on so many hit lists as it is." Bruce shrugged. "Medicine, transport, power, communications, alcohol, and even oil companies have it out for us because of all we're doing. EPI is permanently kept in the know," Bucky said as he joined them. "I've been helping the special ops teams who take down the assassins. So far we've signed many of them into contracts, and on the rare occasion that they refuse, they've been handed over to the countries that want them prosecuted the most." "Bucky," Harry asked, "why did nobody tell me?" "Special ops, Harry," Tony said. "Did you really think Fury would let there be a threat to his golden goose?" "Harry is an asset and a friend," Fury corrected as he walked up with a new guest. "Your Majesty's Stark Banner Barnes, please meet Carol Danvers or Captain Marvel. It's a pleasure to meet you," Natasha said. "Fury's been going on about you for years." "Nick," Carol asked him, "what have you been telling your friends?" "Nothing," Fury stated with a bit of humor, only barely visible on his face. Queen Natasha was trying to be funny. "Queen," Carol asked, "of what country?" "It's a secret," Natasha replied with a grin. "Have you met my husband, Harry Potter?" "Not officially, but I'm told he's the one to meet." Carol smiled and shook both their hands. She was soon introduced to everyone and Thor challenged her to an arm wrestling match when he remembered her fighting Thanos, which she both agreed to and won, much to the amusement of the Asgardians who were watching. They weren't shocked though, as they had seen her fight, too. Soon she received many challengers and she happily agreed and defeated all comers. At some point she and Harry had a bit of a conversation, where he presented her with first a contract and then an Avengers armband. He thought she appreciated the quick form of travel, allowing her both extraction and an easy way to EPI, where Fury had a place prepared for her from the moment he knew she would be around again. She was soon thereafter pulled into a conversation with Tony, Bruce, and Luna about what she had seen in the universe and their plans for traveling the universe. She was very interested in their line-of-sight faster-than-light capabilities and decided to stick around for a bit, so she could meet Jane Foster the next day to discuss their space exploration program. Harry in the meanwhile was feeling quite merry himself. He was drinking the milder form of the ale, and he was enjoying the atmosphere the drink was promoting. There was laughter and enjoyment and a feeling of hope. Very few Asgardians had fallen during the battle, and they had striven to protect the mortals where they could. Harry and Odin would be enchanting an ocean-like sea of water to stretch out beneath the Bifrost, like it had been on Asgard the next day, so that those fallen could be honored correctly in their proper tradition. Natasha had finally decided he was in safe hands, and allowed him to leave her immediate company. It didn't stop her from making sure he was always within sight. She had big plans for their night when they went home, so she would be certain to drag him away before he got too tired. A couple of hours later, Natasha had decided to enact her plan and soon they were saying their goodbyes. Eitri had arranged to finally take his people home via the new Bifrost. When they were ready to leave the celebration, and Carol Danvers would be arranging a lift with Heimdall to deliver her close to where she had been working most recently. Before they could leave, some soldiers turned up with another heap of gold for the purchase of many more barrels of Thor's feast. Apparently the entirety of the vaults of Asgard had been recovered by the people that had gone to Mars. Much of their technology had been broken beyond repair. But Harry assured them that if they could bring the mostly intact devices, he would be able to repair them to the point where they could be more easily brought into working order. Zira was already waiting for them, and when they got on the carpet, she joined them. As they lifted off, Natasha pulled Harry in for a passionate kiss, and they left to catcalls and cheers. Frigga had a look of anticipation on her face, and when Odin asked her about it, Frigga whispered in his ear, "Our daughter-in-law has decided to bless her household and their kingdom with an heir." Odin's answering smile was all she needed to see before Frigga, too, decided that she and Odin could retire from the festivities. They soon took the royal carpet down to the island so that they could have their privacy. The next day Harry woke up tired, with his two ladies lying on either side of him. He felt very rich indeed. When he left bed to go prepare breakfast, he was surprised to see Odin, Frigga, Hela, Wanda and Luna all comfortably seated by the bar, with Eldrin pouring them some tea and coffee. He had only noticed them through his window from his own kitchen and decided to rather go prepare breakfast there so he could offer them something as well. "Good morning, what brings you to New Atlantis?" Harry asked of his parents as he left his house to walk over to them. "We have decided that Thor can contact us via one of the myriad ways he has available if he needs any help," Odin said easily. "For now, your mother and I have decided to take you up on the hospitality of New Atlantis for the foreseeable future." "And what brought this on?" Harry asked, having a suspicion. "My wife informed me that your bride plans to start your family now that there is a relative calm after the storm which was Thanos." Odin said, "We only wish to share in your joy when the time comes. And once Natasha is with child, I will be here to help care for her as a good mother should." Frigga said, "Don't forget us either," Luna said, indicating herself, Wanda and Hela. "I love babies and Wanda wants to learn what I know of Mediwitch magic. I look forward to being an aunt and taking care of my nieces and nephews when they start on their own adventures." Hela added, "No doubt your children will find trouble even here on this peaceful island considering who their parents are." There was laughter all around when Harry stood there dumbstruck. He was not aware that Natasha had planned for this or told anyone. There goes that surprise. It did explain why she had insisted he remove the contraceptive magic, and why their night had been so busy. When he finally came back to himself, he blushed, realizing he must have gotten a far-off look, remembering the night, and grumbled good-naturedly as he got to work on breakfast. "I don't know," Natasha's voice said from the doorway where she was standing. "I think Zira and I will be able to take care of our children on our own. Yeah, the mother of my future grandchildren has decided to grace us with her presence," Frigga said happily as she got up to go hug Natasha. "Were you successful in your quest?" she whispered in her ear. "It will be a couple of weeks before we know for sure, but Harry did relent and removed his protections." Natasha whispered back. More loudly she said, "You didn't tell all of Asgard, did you?" "Of course not," Frigga objected as they walked to the bar. "Why would I spoil such a surprise for you? People will start suspecting though when they see that smile on your face and the glow that surrounds you." Odin interjected with a smile as he got up and hugged Natasha as well. "You've seen this glow many times before. It's the effect Harry has on his bride for his skills in the bedchamber," Frigga said with another happy smile. No doubt all that practice will be paying off shortly. Natasha blushed prettily, but refused to be taunted and simply walked into the bar to hug Harry, where he was trying to hide his furious blush by keeping his head down and his hands busy. "Good morning, love," she said as she hugged him. "What did you mean when you said you and Zira would be able to take care of your kids?" Luna asked. When Zira found out that we'll be trying for a baby, she wanted in on the action, so to speak. Natasha said. "And where is dear Zira?" Ifriga asked. "She's still in a sex coma." Natasha said with a wicked grin, looking for Harry's response. He did not fail to deliver. "She'll probably come around by lunchtime," she added, and that was how their morning went. Harry was the subject of a lot of good-natured ribbing, but he took it in the manner in which it was meant. Those gathered by the bar were all as good as family, Wandu a little less so. But she was a permanent resident of the island, and she and Harry had become good friends. She had even borrowed the book from Harry at some point. She had not blushed when she asked, but the next time Harry saw Jarvis, he had blushed and refused to speak of it. Shortly after breakfast, Loki arrived, looking for Luna, only to be told that she was at EPI, still helping the patients they had from the previous day's battle. Some of the elves had decided to go with her and were working as orderlies. They didn't have any training, but resolved to be trained in any way they could be useful, so that they could be nearby if there was ever a need for them. They learned quickly though and were soon being used to assist in the minutiae that needed attending in a ward. May was very grateful for the help as they had many patients at the time. Shortly before lunch, Odin and Harry left to go work on the water feature they had planned for New Asgard. That took most of the day, and the enchantments were in place shortly before they left. The water would start filling the basin they had created for it, and by the next morning they should have what would approximately look like what had been there before, except perhaps that it would be clear water like the ocean below, where the water was being taken from instead of dark like it had been. Harry had another idea for their new ocean, but resolved to keep the beach and bar he had planned to put in as a surprise for later. They had a quiet evening that night. The events of the previous day was still fresh in Harry's mind, and he was restless, so he got up to go for a walk on the beach. "Where are you going?" Natasha asked as she saw him leaving the room. "I'm just going for a walk on the beach. I need to clear my mind," he replied softly, trying not to wake up Zira. "Do you want me to keep you company?" she asked, about to get out of bed herself. "No, that's fine," Harry said. "I just need a bit of time to think." "Okay." Natasha relented and closed her eyes again. At least he was safe on the island. Harry set out on the beach, walking calmly and doing as promised, sorting through memories and using his occlumency to store away what was unnecessary. It took him a while. A lot had happened in the last few days after all. By the time he was done, he walked back to the houses, but something caught his eye. A shimmer of movement just inside the bounds of the tree line. He walked to the shimmer and found Prongs there waiting for him. "Hey there, Prongs," Harry said. "What brings you out here tonight?" The deer did not respond but turned around and walked further into the forest, looking behind him to make sure Harry was following. After a couple of minutes, Harry moved through a thicket of bushes and came to a standstill. Before him was another tear in reality. He quickly sat down and focused his magic on it, like he had done in the mine shaft in Nidavellir. "Hello," Albus said. "Congratulations on your victory. I still don't like you wearing his face," Harry said. "Well, too bad," the entity said smugly. "We've established why this works for me." "I know," Harry said as he went to sit at the table and poured himself a cup of tea. The room was exactly how he remembered. "Has a universe somewhere exploded or something?" "Natural heat death," the entity corrected. "They happen every few moments, really, considering the infinite nature of existence." "Stop," Harry said. "You're trying to give me a headache again, aren't you?" It smiled at him just a little mischievously. Maybe just a little, it admitted. But we can chat about that later. We've got a couple of things to cover and I need to give you some information. What followed was a rough plan for what would happen next, and Harry listened and asked questions as they went to clarify how things worked and why. It felt like days again before they were done chatting. After the plans, Harry gave the entity a bit of time to talk about his experiences, since the entity was quite curious about certain aspects of mortal lives. It loved talking about sex for some reason. The act of creating life seemed to be foreign, strange, and wonderful to it. It didn't seem to understand, but accepted what Harry told it from his own experiences. It also gave him quite a bit of useful information that he could apply to complete the mission it had set for him that would allow him to more easily fulfill his role. He could also see other applications, and it didn't seem to mind or care that he had plans to use what he had learned for other things. Just remember to follow the rules or you might end up having to do it again. It said as they were saying goodbye. I know you have experience with this sort of thing, but I still suggest wearing a different face or none at all. I understand. Harry said. He paused for a moment before smiling, and thank you. He finished. I should be thanking you. It said, you're fulfilling your role exactly as I had hoped. There were a few moments there that I was worried. Your wife seems to be good for you. Well chosen. We chose each other. Harry said with a fond smile as he thought of her. Not really, it said, but you'll figure that one out later. Stop it. Harry said again. It always liked to tease him with information it refused to give him fully. Goodbye, my avatar, and good luck. It greeted him. Harry was about to greet him as well, but realized he was standing in front of a quickly vanishing rift. Harry felt a draw on his power and concentrated for a moment to allow Natasha to apparate to him. What just happened? She demanded as she looked around, fully kitted out and in her armor, before spotting the last shimmers of the fading rift. Oh, she sighed in relief. You had another chat with your friend, she asked. She had felt his connection reset again. He likes to think of us as partners, Harry said. I do something for him, he does something for me. There's an exchange of sorts that we both find useful. You're not answering my question. Natasha said. Did he mention another threat? She asked. Yes, and not really at the same time. Harry said with a smirk. Harry, she said dangerously. Okay, Harry said. I'm going back home to fix my world. I'll make #2 by Burnable. Well, Tony asked from inside his new suit. What's the verdict? Stephen got up with a serious look on his face before he nodded. He turned to Harry. Go with your second plan. He said. Are you sure? Harry asked. Do I look like I'm joking? Stephen asked with a straight face. Okay, Harry said dubiously. After the bombardment, Thanos came down to speak to them first. He saw the Avengers gathered and asked, did the witch manage to hold onto the wizard? He smirked at their perplexed faces. They must not know what happened to him. Then he felt it. His lower body was on fire. Ah! He yelled in surprise as he tried to put the fire out with his hands, but both the gauntlet and his other hand just caught fire as well. In seconds his entire body was engulfed in flames, and when he tried to use the reality stone to smother the fire, it just started again. In a last-ditch effort he transported himself onto the ship using the space stone, but the ship soon caught fire as well. While he jumped in a pool of water to try and douse the flames, but the water started to boil instantly and the fire still clung onto him. Nearby, Harry was floating invisibly and insubstantially as he just kept on reapplying the spell when Thanos tried to escape it by using the stones. 5 minutes later, Harry reappeared with the stones safely in his pouch. I'm suddenly in the mood for a barbecue, he said as the others just watched the giant ship. which was engulfed in flames. Escape pods, ships and leviathans tried to flee, but the greedy fire would simply leap onto them and they too would start burning. 2 hours later, the Avengers stepped through a portal and returned to the waiting armies of their allies. "You may all go home," Thor said. He was in a sour mood. "My brother stole all our fun," he complained. "What about Thanos?" Fury asked from where he was standing with the generals by the entrance to the command bunker. "Harry burned the entire ship and its armies to ash," Tony said, sounding slightly in awe and with quite a bit of fear in his voice. "Seriously, it was just one spell," he trailed off as he reconsidered his life choices. Maybe he should start spending more time with Rhodey again. #Omake #3 inspired by Hacken 2 Feb. Well, Tony asked from inside his new suit. "What's the verdict?" Steven got up with a serious look on his face. Before he turned to Harry, "Why did you bring him?" he asked plaintively. "Who?" Harry asked. From behind them came the sound of singing. "I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts." Everyone turned to see a man dressed in black and red sitting on an actual pile of coconuts, wearing a sun hat and drinking from a hollowed-out coconut. "Wade," Wade asked, "what are you doing here? How did you find my coconut stash?" he asked indignantly. "We're here to stop Thanos," Harry said uncertainly. "No." Wade snapped up and drew his swords. "My coconuts," he shouted as he ran up to Harry, grabbing something from his hand as he ran past, faster than Harry thought possible. "How did he do that?" Harry asked with mild concern as he looked at his hand. "Do what?" Natasha asked. "He stole my power ring," Harry said with real worry in his voice now. A lunatic with that much power could never be a good thing. They watched as Deadpool disappeared from view only to reappear next to Thanos, wearing an exact replica of Harry's outfit. "I warned you, Thanos," came a bad English accent from under the hood. "I will save all the coconuts." "Who are?" Thanos started, only to be cut off as Deadpool made a very familiar hand gesture, turning a portal between Thanos' head and shoulders. The head fell through and landed in front of Harry, where they all stood amazed. What followed was a scene of utter randomness, as things from fiction and fantasy popped into existence at Deadpool's gestures. The creatures didn't wait for the army to descend, but attacked the floating vessel. It took many hours, but Deadpool apparently decided they'd had enough, when the ship started gaining altitude to try and flee, only for it to blow up with another gesture from Deadpool. "That was fun," Wade said as he removed the power ring from his finger, making the glowing green seemingly animated suit he had just been wearing disappear, and returning him to normal as he flicked the ring to Harry. "That last one was murder on my image," he said. "Keep the ring. I'll stick to my handy-dandy twin katana." Harry had refused to tell her more before they went to bed, but she had made him promise not to leave before they could make plans and plan contingencies. When they woke the next day, Natasha joined him instantly and refused to leave his side again. She knew he would keep his promise, but with Harry, a walk by the beach led to meetings with super-omniversal beings of infinite power. So she planned to stick by his side until she felt he wouldn't disappear on her. This was instantly noticed when they walked to the bar, and when Frigga asked, Natasha said, Harry had another meeting with his benefactor. Odin and Frigga had been told about his previous meeting with Death and knew it was supposed to be secret. Luna, however, didn't think about it as she said, "Ooh, you met with Death. Was he wearing a cloak? Did he have extra appendages? Was he human or some anthropomorphized animal?" Harry thought about it for a moment as he started on making breakfast before replying, "Yes, no, kind of, and he could be if he felt like it, I suppose. Respectively, I think." Luna nodded like she had followed that and had expected the answers. Hela, on the other hand, was shocked. "Did you just say you met Death?" she asked. "It's a long story, but yes," Harry said. "Harry's Death's representative in the universe so that he doesn't get forced to incarnate." Luna said offhandedly, How do you know these things? Harry asked, his hands stopping as he focused on her. Luna just shrugged. I couldn't explain it to you, she said. Anyway, Harry said, hoping to get back on subject. I have been given some information that will help me save our old world. Luna looked up sharply and asked, did he warn you not to be seen? Yes, Harry answered. He was about to ask again how she knew, but then just dropped the subject. Kind of, there will be loopholes, he admitted. Oh good, that will make things easier. Luna said, what are you two talking about? Hella asked, it's still a long story. Harry said. When Luna made to answer, Harry said, don't. Okay. Luna smiled and took another sip of tea. I really can't share too many details. Harry apologized. Some things are not allowed. Odin and Frigga didn't look happy about this, and Frigga asked, will you come back? She looked like she was fearing the worst. Harry smiled at her. Of course I'm coming back, mother. This is my home and I'd miss you too much if I didn't come back, he assured her as he walked around the bar to hug her. You better, Frigga insisted. I'll not miss one day with my grandchildren. I'll make sure he keeps his promise, Natasha insisted as he walked back to the bar to continue on breakfast. Yes, she will, Harry said. Harry, don't wait, what? Natasha asked after his words sank in. Did you think I'd leave you behind? Harry chuckled at her shocked expression. I'm going to need you there. We're not pressed for time either. It's not like my world will get more destroyed in the meanwhile. Oh, Natasha said. Well, good, she finished lamely. It had been something she dreaded he'd insist on doing alone. You're not leaving me behind either, Tony's voice said over the sound system. Harry had forgotten that it was hooked up and that Friday was still connected. Tony must have been listening. How long were you eavesdropping? Harry asked the ceiling. The whole time, Tony said. After Amora took you, I set up a monitoring protocol. Friday lets me know the moment it seems like there's a mission being discussed. Since you left the rest of the team behind that time, I didn't have much of a choice. Harry wasn't certain, but Tony sounded upset to him. Get over here, Harry said. I'm not talking to a ceiling. Tony soon walked out of his house where the arrival point for his portkey was with Pepper. He kept Pepper between them and didn't make eye contact with Harry. What are you doing? Natasha asked, knowing full well what he was doing. I don't want him to hit me with the memory mojo, Tony said, still not looking. I'm not going to obliviate you, Tony. Harry sighed. It's against our contracts anyway. This seemed to put Tony at ease and he finally looked up and walked next to Pepper. I knew that, he lied. When they were seated, Tony asked, so how are we saving your world? Did death give you a new superpower? Actually, he did tell me about something I didn't think of that will be useful. Harry smirked. Remember your idea for using magic to make real physical food? Like a replicator, yes. Tony said, referring to popular science fiction. Well, I know how to replicate things permanently now, Harry said with a grin. To prove his point, he put one plate of the breakfast he had been preparing on the table and duplicated it with magic. Then he focused his magic on each plate and overloaded the plate with magic, until it glowed with the power, before he retracted his power, until there was none remaining in the, now real, duplicates. Odin had been following the power and had shied away when the power became too much, thinking it might explode, but when Harry retracted his power, the physical objects remained. How did you do this? He asked as he took a replicated sausage off the plate and bit into it. It was still warm from when Harry had cooked it and he could tell it was real. You know how I conjure water? Harry asked. Odin nodded. Well, it turns out that was actually quite scientific. It is easier for the hydrogen and oxygen molecules to stay together and would take more power to separate than it does to combine. So you force the magic to permanently stay in the configuration like how you normally change things, but add more power to stay in that shape longer. Tony asked. Almost, Harry said, in those cases I'd leave the power in the conjuration or transfiguration, and when the magic ran out, it would dissipate the effect, changing it back, since the molecules want to reclaim their original configuration, unless the substance stays the same, in which case the change is permanent. What I just did was force a lot of power into the conjuration, which is a transfiguration of air molecules to keep their shape. Then I used the knowledge Odin gave me to make the molecules want to stay in their current configuration, making that their new default state they want to return to. So when I removed all the magic from the object, it stays in the new configuration and becomes real, Tony exclaimed. That's awesome. Do you think you could put that in an enchantment factory? I'd have to make a sentient enchantment that can use Aesir magic to do that, Harry said apologetically, which would be very difficult indeed. Odin said as he nodded along, finally understanding what he had felt. A truly ingenious application of both sets of powers. Well done. Wait, does this mean you can copy anything? Tony asked. Even people? No. Fortunately, there is still the matter of the soul and life force that living beings possess, Harry said. Harry's magic can emulate life though, Odin said. So he could potentially give a copy of a person temporary life but not a soul or real intelligence. He saw Tony's relief. Don't worry, friend Tony, for my son may be able to do many things, but he cannot replace his friends with magic. Organs, Natasha exclaimed. He could duplicate donor organs, eyes, livers, hearts, lungs. That would actually be possible. Odin agreed. Good idea, Natasha. You will need to handle that as the need arises when the time comes. Harry said he didn't want to stand in a hospital and copy parts of the human body all day. No, Natasha exclaimed again. You could copy an organ from a donor and he'd not need to lose the original. That does sound like it could work. Harry agreed. Good point. What does this have to do with your old world though? Tony then asked. I'll need to show you when the time comes, Harry said evasively. It's personal. Fine, Tony conceded with a smile. Harry seemed to have accepted his help. Changing the subject quickly, he asked, what about diamonds? Can you copy them? I'll not be copying precious metals or stones for you, Tony. Harry said, it's unethical. Spoil sport, Tony said as he dug into his plate of breakfast food. I might decide to start producing adamantite wiring though, Harry thought out loud. I imagine we could use that in our prosthetics to give people sensation in their limbs again. So replicating one precious metal is fine as long as it's used for other people? Tony asked, not really wanting to argue but still wanting to win the point. To increase their quality of life, yes, Harry said easily. Drop it, Tony, Pepper said. She was still reeling at the idea that Harry had made contact with death. Harry is right. If everything is free, what does it leave for anyone to work for and achieve? You are very wise, Ifriga said with an approving nod. Hela, who had been quiet the entire time, decided to ask, could I join you on your journey? If you want to, I don't see why not. Harry confirmed he'd not have any difficulty. Death had given him the perfect way to facilitate this. You have to realize, though, that there won't be a whole lot for people that go with me to do. How are you getting there? Tony asked, wondering just how he was planning on traversing the route that only Fox had been able to till this point. Are you taking Fox? No, he won't be able to go where we are going. Harry said, I'm actually planning on walking there, he answered with a mysterious smile. You're not going to tell us, are you? Pepper asked for Tony. Trade secret, I'm afraid. Only two beings in this universe knows the secret, and I'm apparently the only one that can speak to one of them, Harry said smugly. The other being you. Natasha nodded. It's at least good to know you have that part planned. That and I still need to figure out one of the steps. It has to do with storing things in a pocket dimension that's tied to my magical core, Harry said, looking at Odin. So you'll be speaking with Loki then? Odin asked with a smirk. I was thinking of pranking him until he relents, Harry said with a bit of an evil smirk. Or you could just ask me, Loki said as he became visible. Luna was the only person that didn't jump or act surprised at his presence. How long have you been here? Harry asked. I never left. Loki admitted. I was still on the island last night when I felt your magic in the forest. Harry's face became impassive. And what were you doing at the time? He asked. He knew Loki and Luna spent a lot of time together, but he'd not allow him to use her like one of his conquests. Loki lifted his hands and said, I was reading in my room, honest. Loki has a very nice bedroom, Luna said with a smile. And when did you show Luna your bedroom? Natasha asked, with a hint of steel in her tone. Loki had gone as white as a sheet. I don't remember ever showing her my room, I promise. He defended himself. He knew Luna was dear to Harry. He would never push things with her. Luna then burst out laughing. When Loki realized she had pranked him, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That's not fair, he said after righting himself. I'm not allowed to prank you back. Who said that? Luna asked, cocking her head to the side. Everyone in my family. Loki admitted it was true. He had been approached on multiple occasions by each member of the family and warned against making the new addition to the island feel unwelcome. Oh, well, I give you permission as long as it's not too mean. Luna said. She hadn't known the people had been warning him off, and while she appreciated the thought, she wasn't a child. She still wasn't sure what he expected to happen between them, as she simply enjoyed his way of seeing the world, much like he did with her. But he was a good friend in her mind at least. You might end up regretting that. Natasha warned. I'll be fine. Luna scoffed. I can always just use one of the spells Harry taught me if he goes too far. What spell were you thinking? Odin asked in interest. Harry mostly taught us defensive magic when our teacher refused to do her job. Luna shuddered at the memory of Dolores Umbridge, but I seem to recall a nifty inversion hex. I forget what it does, though. She looked at Harry. Does it turn people inside out or does it reflect a spell? Harry smirked. He knew that she actually remembered. If Loki ever deserves it, cast it at him and find out. He suggested. Loki paled a little more. He had seen the shudder and misread its meaning. I think I'd rather stay on your good side, he said to Luna. Then he turned to Harry. If you're done with your big brother routine, let's discuss this pocket dimension. That was the end of that discussion, and soon Loki was teaching Harry about one of his niftiest tools. It took Harry the whole day to start making progress, but he couldn't master it by the time he went to bed that night, since the magic was the easier sort. He made some more progress the next day, though, and he had the theory down. It was just another form of manipulation of dimensions, like when he made something insubstantial. The difficulty for him was tying the pocket to his magical core, which was just as insubstantial. It would take him a few more days before he could trust the small pocket he had created with his limited knowledge of the power. The next day was Thanos' trial. He was expected to be there as he was the only one that could move the man and his cell. The Avengers assembled and Harry opened a portal for them to the designated area. Then they went down to the cell. When they arrived, Harry noted something he found funny despite himself. They had brought food and water for the big man, but he had been unable to touch any of it. The guards didn't seem to mind and left the food there to spoil right inside his cell. Getting a bit thirsty there, Thanos? Harry asked. The man opened his eyes and sat up. They noticed his arms had fully regrown. Harry Potter, are you here to release me? He asked. Why would we release you? Tony, in his Iron Man suit, asked. A moment of frustration crossed Thanos' face. Oh, you had backup plans. Hopefully they weren't on your ship, because as you might remember, it got sucked into a black hole. Tony was smirking. Why are you here? Thanos asked. We're here for your trial, Harry said, levitating a large glass of water he had conjured through the bars. Thanos ignored it until it made contact with him. He didn't even show shock as he quickly grabbed it and drank from it slowly. When he was done, he tossed the glass back through the bars, where it passed right through Harry's head. Not really getting this out of phase thing, is he? Harry asked the others as he levitated the cell up and turned his back on the man walking in front of the cell as it followed him. I think he gets it, Natasha said. He's just showing his displeasure or testing the range of the phase maybe. He's supposed to be smart. Why? Thanos asked as they walked. Why what? Harry asked. Why did you stop me? Thanos asked. I would have saved so many from suffering. Until enough time has passed and you have to do it again. Harry asked back. We've discussed what you were doing and I see the logic in it, but there is something missing from your plan. What's that? Thanos asked. Harry stopped, turned around and lifted his hand. Then he flipped it and Thanos' cage upturned itself. Magic. Then Harry turned again and walked on. Everywhere I go, I spread what I can to help the people. You said I stole power. I also invested it. Have you ever been to Sakaar? They used to have the sort of problems you are talking about. I'm told that the laws changed some over the last couple of 100 years. Bearing children is now something you need a license for, and parents are only allowed a certain amount before control is implemented. It's a little barbaric for my tastes, but apparently it's worked and the populace have become stable. Everyone is working together to live in harmony. If you had tried something like that, I could maybe have even understood, but you decided to kill half of the universe. I only mention Sakaar because I went there for a short while and helped build up the lower caste of their society. Once civilization took root and with able leadership anything was possible. Harry finished, but you are only one man. In the infinity of space you cannot hope to bring stability to all. Thanos argued. You won't even live long enough to see the whole of the universe. Your dream is impossible, but mine was attainable. No, it really wasn't. Harry said as he stopped again. He cast a silencing spell around them. Do you know why? He then asked. Why? Thanos sneered back. Because the Avengers would have stopped you whether I was here or not. Harry said, I asked someone who knows the future. Your destiny was always to disappear and despair your failure. But the damage you would have done before you could be stopped would have been incalculable. That would have been the cost of your poisonous dream. You lie. Thanos grinned. You will soon find out that I'm not a liar. Harry said as he cancelled his spell and proceeded to the chamber where the court was gathered. Harry placed the cell on the floor before the judges. There were many of them. It was symbolic of the many races Thanos had attacked throughout his campaign. The verdict had already been given since Thanos admitted his guilt freely. The only part that remained was sentencing. Nova Prime, in her position as the Prime, spoke after all the crimes had been read. It took a long time. Thanos, you have committed crimes against many worlds and you attempted the destruction of half of all life throughout the universe. For your crimes you are sentenced to death. There were bloodthirsty cheers around the courtroom and Prime had to wait for them to calm themselves before she continued. Harry Potter, as the man that imprisoned you and who is the only one that can safely control your imprisonment and destruction, has agreed to be the one to carry out your sentence. She turned to Harry and nodded. If you please, Commander Potter. Understood. Harry said. He turned on the Mad Titan and made eye contact and focused a message Death had for him into his mind. It was not easy. Harry had been warned that he had a formidable mind, and that he should not attempt to read it, but that he could safely send the message along. In Thanos' mind, he saw the image of a woman with a skeletal face, the same image Thanos had always thought of as Death. Thanos, for the sin of trying to force me on half the universe, I sentence you to embrace me. You who has lived for thousands of years and may have even lived to see the end, will now be made to taste my gift. My avatar Harry Potter will carry out your sentence in my stead, since for me to claim you myself, I doom the world. Harry Potter, I, Death, sentenced the Mad Titan Thanos to be burned by the living flame till he is no more. Harry withdrew his power and saw real fear in Thanos' face. "You have been sentenced. Your end will come from the living flame, Fiendfire." As Harry said the word, a tongue of dark red flame appeared in his hand. "If you truly are the avatar of death, then you will finish what I started when you realize there is no other choice," Thanos said. Even though he was looking at Harry in fear, there was the sound of many people reacting in shock, but Harry's eyes never left the man. He could do damage control later. "Goodbye, Thanos. I hope you find justice and clarity in whatever afterlife you believe in," Harry said as he blew on the flame he held such tight control over. The flame engulfed him and he screamed in pain as the dark fire started eating at him. He covered his face with his hands as he tried to protect it, but soon enough he stopped being able to breathe and fell to the floor. The fire formed into the body of a snake, which coiled around the body until it could not be seen. A minute later the snake bit its own tail and started eating itself and then started to diminish until it was no more. Nothing was left, not even dust on the floor. Some of the bars on the cage had started to warp and bend as the heat had increased as Thanos' body was consumed. Harry was just standing there until his duty had been carried out, the heat never touching him. And then he sagged in relief as the last of the fire died. When he looked up, he saw a lot of scared faces looking at him. Natasha, having heard everything, decided to put Harry and everyone else's minds at ease, so she walked up to him and took his hand. When he looked at her, she smiled at him. "Don't listen to the ravings of a madman, Harry. He didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't know you." Harry smiled a sad smile at her before he realized what she was doing. "Of course, love," Harry said. "I'm more inclined to just spend time on my island and having a bit of fun with you than starting a quest of killing innocents anyway." "Here, here." Nova Prime agreed. She didn't necessarily believe their words, but she knew Harry well enough to know his character. While she knew that Thanos was not a raving lunatic, she also didn't believe what he had said. "Thank you, Commander Potter. You have done your duty and we thank you for your assistance." Slowly, the people in attendance relaxed as they chose to believe that Thanos was just as mad as was always believed. Many of them had heard the rumors about Harry Potter, and all he was doing to help his world and any world he came to. It was easier to believe he was a force for good than imagine him being an even stronger force of evil. As the Avengers made their way to exit the courtroom, while many still looked at them in awe, one of the people in the aisle next to them walked out and offered Harry a hand. It chittered and bowed, but Harry couldn't understand, so he looked at Thor. "She is saying thank you for avenging her family. She said that she will pray to her deity to bless you and keep you safe always." Thor translated, "Can you tell her that her thanks is enough?" Harry said back as he took the hand and placed his other on it, then bowed as she had. Thor seemed to say what he said verbatim, and Harry understood it, but the apparent woman seemed to also understand him. When she let go of his hand, it was like a floodgate had been opened as everyone present seemed to want to get in on the act. Harry looked around and saw Nova Prime waiting patiently, not seeming bothered by the disturbance in her courtroom. It took 2 hours for everyone to say their thanks in their various languages, and Thor dutifully translated when it was not understandable, which it mostly was. Apparently the translation implant that Brand had gotten through the Nova Core simply couldn't understand all languages, even though Allspeak could understand the intent behind all intelligent speech. Harry didn't trust the implant until Peter Quill had confessed to having one as well, and it had proven useful to him. They had needed to protect it with runes, but it ended up being a benefit, especially when he worked in other countries. That didn't mean Harry didn't still have Allspeak on his list of things to learn, though. When they finally left, Harry made a snap decision and pulled out his mirror to arrange quick transport for the people back to their planets with Heimdall. He'd arrange a pensive for him to use for the purpose. He supposed it was a good idea for him to have one anyway. It would make his life a little simpler if he ever needed to report on something he saw. That done, they returned to the island, where Fury was taking an off day and chatting with Zira, Odin, and Frigga as he lay on a deck chair, sipping on a tropical drink. He didn't take off often, but at EPI he actually had the ability to trust his people to do their jobs now that contracts protected everything. It wasn't often, but after the storm, which was Thanos, it had been suggested that he get some rest. There was a theory going around that he hadn't slept since the first attack had happened on Xandar. Harry sat down at the bar with his friends after greeting them, and they got exactly 4 minutes of peace before Tony spoke up. "So, when are we leaving to go save your world?" he asked, knowing full well that the other Avengers could hear. Harry should have expected it, honestly. Tony wouldn't let him leave without backup, and the team were all his friends. As expected, everyone was looking at Harry with different questions on their faces. Steve, however, looked ready to simply get up and start packing. Harry really appreciated the way Steve didn't even need to hear what the plan was to decide to join and support him. "We've got time," Harry said simply. "What's the plan, though?" Tony persisted. "Can I at least get drunk first?" Harry asked. "Talking about time travel always gives me a headache." This got even Steve's eyebrows to rise in question. "Time travel?" he asked. "Kind of," Harry said evasively. "What kind?" Bruce asked. "Because playing with time is a dangerous thing theoretically." "Indeed," the voice of the Ancient One said as she appeared on the other side of the bar like she had been sitting there all along. Tony, who had jumped in surprise, asked, "Where have you been? We haven't seen you in months." "I've been here on the island." Yao lied with a smile. She'd been following everything that was going on from the mirror dimension in case she was needed. "But they didn't need to know that. I keep busy. There's so much to catch up on when you've spent as long as I did protecting the world." Tony was about to ask why she didn't help, why she hadn't been there, but couldn't really say that after a statement like that. "Fair enough." He relented. "Indeed," she said again. Then she turned to Harry. "I'd also like to know the plan. I am uniquely qualified to help after all." Harry sighed. "Fine," he said as he made to order a shot of Asgardian fire whiskey to help with the coming headache, only for it to already be in front of him. "Here's the plan," he started while nodding at Eldrin in thanks before downing the shot and starting to inform them of his plan. That conversation lasted the entirety of the rest of the day as they started planning the trip, and he gave what information he could. Hela and Loki insisted on going with him, even though they knew there was a high likelihood that they would be cut off from Asgard's people, and thus the power they represented. Harry couldn't take the island with him after all. Steve was instantly on board as well, as was Tony, Bruce, and Wanda. The rest would stay behind to cover for them in case any emergencies occurred in what Harry suspected would only take a few days here. The fact that Natasha was going wasn't even discussed. Luna strangely opted out with one of her knowing smile, saying that she had other things to do. Harry had thought she'd want to see her father again, but didn't bring it up. By the next morning, Tony was already busy with one of a couple of projects he wanted to complete before he left, and Jarvis was busy on another project for Harry, who had his own plans to make. He had had an idea that was tickling him and he wanted to try at it for the next couple of days while the others were still preparing. He had told Natasha of his plans, obviously, and then went to work. His power ring was connected to a remote MSC shell, which was on Svartalfheim. It in turn had a pocket dimension, unlike the others, which was packed with physical power storage rune-covered metallic discs. They in turn were connected to the runes through adamantite wiring, which measured the power and connected his ring to the power stored within. He had also created a conjuration and enchantment factory, which could produce MSC shells on demand. The only problem with them was that they would slowly drain their power until the shells disappeared. Until they had figured out how to use runes to cycle the escaping energy back into the shell, which made them last much longer. His work with his personal pocket dimension was still ongoing, but it had given him an insight about how to expand the pocket using nothing but his own power. He was going to attempt something similar now. He wanted to test his theory by dedicating the power that came in, once the device was full, to extend the pocket and then conjure temporary MCU shells and wiring. They wouldn't last forever, but they should be able to sustain themselves on the incoming energy, until they reach a point where the loss of energy over all the conjured shells was the same as the incoming power. At that point, it would reach a balance of loss and gain. Harry entered the pocket via apparition, leaving his power ring outside in the workshop, just in case it caused problems being so close to its source. Harry then went to the edge of the pocket and inscribed another set of runes, the same ones that maintained the current pocket, but left it in a state where it was malleable, which was how he normally expanded a pocket, before setting the runes back to maintain the current shape at least. This specific one, though, would be maintained by the incoming power, so the rune set could be left in this malleable state. Then he tried expanding the pocket and letting it close back to normal, which worked fine. He next started on the conjuration enchantment, which would create the discs and temporary wiring. Having done this before made it much simpler now. He did have to modify the enchantment to create the discs and wiring as the space available increased. When that was done, he tested the pocket again. Increasing the pocket, he noted that the discs and wiring were being conjured, but when the pocket shrank, it started pressing them back, so he had to manually vanish them. He realized with some regret that he'd have to have the entire enchantment done before he could test the expansion again, and he'd have to be ready to vanish the discs if it became necessary. Over the next couple of days, he worked at incorporating all the features his latest project might need, including but not limited to conjuring breathable air, so that it didn't become a vacuum that he couldn't apparate into. When he was done, all he had to do was connect the wiring after manually expanding the pocket, and ensuring that the discs were removed as the pocket shrank back. He did that first, though, not wanting to power his enchantment yet, in case something went horribly wrong. When he expanded the pocket, the discs and wiring were conjured, all connected as it should except for where the pocket began. He specifically left that disconnected for the moment. When he let the pocket shrink, he did so slowly but found that the discs were being removed as necessary. Perfect. Next he expanded it again and confirmed that the discs were enchanted as they should be, but found that they had not. It was with frustration that he realized that the enchantment factory would need to be connected for that feature to work. He could have just stopped there, but decided that he had spent enough time on this. If it didn't work, that would be fine. He could try again another time after all. He gripped his emergency port key, just in case, and conjured the missing wiring to power the factories and enchantments. Instantly he noted that the pocket started to extend away from himself, conjuring discs as it went, and the discs started to glow until they were fully loaded. Then the pocket extended again. Grinning to himself, he vanished the connections he had just conjured and the process stopped. But the new dimensions were maintained by the power in the conjured discs. As it should. Crowing in delight for his victory, Harry conjured the connections again and watched as the pocket expanded again. Then he just needed to test the last thing. Harry apparated outside, put his ring back on and went outside. He proceeded to cast spells using power directly from the ring. He overpowered every draining spell he could think of and cast until he was sure the pocket should have decreased in size again. When he went to check, he was pleased to see it had, in fact, removed the additional discs and the extended pocket was now missing, while the physical discs were being powered up again. He watched and waited until they were charged, and then the pocket started to grow again. 2 hours later, the pocket was twice the size it normally was and showed no signs of slowing down. Harry grinned and apparated out again. He mounted a spare mirror in front of the monitoring runes, which displayed the charge of the battery, and connected it to his wrist-mounted mirror. He'd be able to call the display up at will now. Then he went back to the island. He was excited to see Jarvis sitting there with Wanda. Those two had been spending a lot of time together, since Jarvis would be staying and she'd be leaving with Harry. He walked up to them and said, "Hi guys, you're in a good mood today, Harry." Jarvis said with a smile, "Anything I should know?" Harry smirked and showed him the mirror. "Is this the display on your MSC shell?" Jarvis asked before his smile vanished. "This can't be right, it's at more than twice capacity and still climbing." "I know, isn't it cool?" Harry asked. Then he reached into his personal pocket dimension and removed another MSC shell. "See, this one even still has power." "What are you planning, Harry?" Wanda asked. "How are those two things connected?" "Ah," Jarvis said, having figured it out. "Your new knowledge about pocket dimensions has given you the ability to build some new enchantments, I presume. And considering the state of your MSC shell, I'm assuming you intend to take it with you." "Yup," Harry said smugly. "I'm going to let it suck up as much power as it can, and then I'm going to take it with me." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Wanda asked. "What if the pocket doesn't go with you?" "That's why I've been working on tying it to my magical core," Harry explained. "Where I go, so does my magical core, and it will bring the pocket with me. I was also given a very good reason to need this. It will help me save more people." "You intend to keep people in your pocket dimension?" Jarvis asked. "Don't be silly," Harry denied. "I'm taking backup plan, it's going in the pocket dimension." "Why not just use your pouch?" Jarvis asked. "I can't take the pouch," Harry said. "Its magics are regulated. The goblins would be able to find me in minutes if I arrive with it. Thus the need for the alternative." Jarvis nodded along. "And now you'll be going with more power than anyone alive and all the toys you've worked on since coming here." "Will we be bringing anyone back?" Wanda asked. I don't know," Harry said honestly. There were people he'd like to bring, but they had lives. If he could pull off what he was going to attempt, he'd need to wait for certain things to happen as well. Fortunately, he already knew when the events would happen. 6 days later, all of their plans were completed. Harry had already had meetings with the directors and managers of EPI, and Jarvis had a necklace that would allow him to look like Harry should the need arise. He called a final meeting to discuss what they were going to do. Assembled were Harry, Natasha, Steve, Loki, Hela, Tony, Bruce, and Wanda. "So are you all ready?" Harry asked. "All of your items have been returned to backup plan, and Fox has decided to spend the time while we're gone in Asgard." Bruce confirmed. "He also donated some tears, and I've brought some potions in case we need them, along with the one you asked for. Everything is being handled at Stark Industries and PI. You also had the storage device you had me build." Tony confirmed. "I may have also brought a surprise or two," he said with a grin. "You didn't give me any homework," Steve groused. "I trained a bit more with the belt, though, and the gear you wanted me to have." "Us," Hela corrected. "We've all got the equipment my brother made for us, I believe. I have also trained in their use. I might decide to keep some of it if I may." "Sure thing, Hela, consider it yours." Harry aloud. "Loki, Wanda, are you guys ready for this?" He asked the last two who hadn't spoken. He and Natasha had had a final night with Zira, and she was still recovering from that. They hoped it would tide her over. "I am looking forward to it," Loki said eagerly. He very seldom had the opportunity to have an adventure without Thor there. He was hoping to come back with some stories that will make Thor jealous. It would be nice to see other natural spellcasters. Wanda admitted. "I'm actually more worried that I'm considered underpowered when compared to normal witches." Harry had not told her how strong she was in comparison to normal witches and wizards. He wanted her to strive to become better on her own, and she had succeeded marvelously. "You don't have to worry," Harry told her. "You'll do fine." She was already up to 7th year in all her basic classes, and she'd even taken the time to study some potions and arithmancy with Jarvis. She was still hoping to one day become an enchanter like Harry, but she was also very interested in spell creation. "So, how are you going to be traveling?" Tony tried a final time. Harry had never told them. He was so curious he could burst. "I told you, Tony, I can't discuss it," Harry said. "Drop it, Tony," Natasha warned dangerously. She'd been getting more moody the closer the mission came to the starting time. Harry had discussed what he could with her and once gotten a headache in warning. "If he tells you something he's not allowed to, you're putting him at risk. Trust me, I know." Tony saw the look in her eyes and relented. "Okay," he said. He knew there was something about information Death gave Harry that made discussing things difficult. He had wondered if it was a magical oath or something, but discounted it since Harry had once told him he'd never make any more of those. Magical oaths were permanent. You couldn't break them like you could tear up a contract. "Okay then," Harry said, giving them all one last look over and nodding. He retrieved backup plan from his storage and opened it for them. They'd added a couple more bedrooms so that people could have their privacy, and Tony had brought a shrunken supercomputer, thanks to the PIM particle, and they even had their own cellular and comm system. There was a big screen in Harry's room, and they would be able to watch what he was doing once he allowed them to. Other than that, they had an unhealthy amount of movies, series, food, and alcohol. They'd be able to entertain themselves. Hella even had her room of requirement pendant, and Natasha wouldn't be missing out on her training sessions with Sensei. They all climbed into backup plan, and Natasha gave Harry one last kiss before she climbed in and closed the lid. Harry shrunk it down and placed it in storage. He decided to call it that instead of pocket dimension. It was simpler and would not give away its nature when spoken of in mixed company. When he was certain he was ready, he went to the room of requirement in the Avengers manner. He cast a new Fidelius, so that nobody could find what he was about to make. Then he stood in front of the space where the door should be and concentrated his magic through his ring. A couple of minutes later, he paced in front of the door while focusing both his will and his power on the door he wished to summon. When the door appeared, Harry shuddered. It was a veil. The veil. He placed his ring in storage and took a couple of breaths to steady himself and walked through the dreaded veil of death. It was difficult to move. It was much like when he used his time dilation. It was like walking on the bottom of a lake filled with molasses. He pressed on though, even though he could not see or feel his body. There was just a sense of movement, and he knew he had to press on. He knew he was pressing through a barrier that separated the different realities. None but the entities that exist throughout all realities could do this, and him. He knew he was back in his home world, when he could suddenly move more easily, and he became aware of his senses again. Around him there was the moaning of spirits he had heard so long ago, but they weren't speaking to him anymore. They were focused on a man who lay just inside the veil, through which Harry could see a fight he had not witnessed for many, many years. He rushed up to the man and placed a disc on his chest, which encased him in a glowing cocoon of power and ported him to the special reception area in backup plan. He had not looked at the man, just in case his emotions got the better of him. It was serious. The reason he could come to this time was because this was the last time the veil had been activated. Death had power on this side of the veil, so he had arranged it so that Harry could come here and now. He looked through the veil as Remus tried to hold onto his younger self before he ripped away and ran after Bellatrix. Harry knew the aftermath of that fight. He knew his younger self blamed himself for serious death. Just like he had, he'd have to let himself continue as he had. Otherwise, he'd be making a new timeline and basically diverging this one. If that happened, he'd have to start all over again when death made him go to the original timeline to try again. Harry would not doom a whole new timeline and all the people therein just so he could give himself a pep talk. Harry activated his invisibility and walked out of the veil. He tried his phasing capability and almost fell through the floor. But he quickly remembered to activate his flight and flew after the younger Harry. Harry put on the special glasses and activated their ability to broadcast to backup plan. Then he watched as Dumbledore fought Voldemort. Harry was able to contain himself through the whole thing. He knew he came out on top at the end. When the fight was over and the minister appeared and saw Voldemort, Harry decided to leave. He didn't need to get angry at idiots right now. He had other things to do. Harry tried opening a portal and found it didn't work. Apparently tapping Yggdrasil only works where you have one. Or if there was one here, it worked differently. Instead, Harry flew to the burrow. He remembered it getting blown up during the next Christmas, but Mrs. Weasley should still be staying at headquarters at this point. Harry took a moment to cast a Fidelius and then he copied the entirety of the house. It instantly started falling apart when he was done, as the magic that was holding the original up wasn't copied. Harry had to repair and enchant the house after that. When he was done, he focused his power on it, and then he used his Aesir magic to make it permanent. Satisfied with his work, Harry shrunk the house. Not having more of Pym's technology with him, he had to do it the old-fashioned way. Once it was shrunk, he took out a snow globe. It was one of the storage devices Tony had made for him. It had inertial dampening runes, so the house wouldn't break if people decided to play with the globe and place the house in it. With an illusion to make it look like it was permanently snowing, just because he could. That done, he removed the Fidelius and flew to London, where he put the penthouse of a hotel under Fidelius as well. They were saving the world. They could have a nice place to stay while they did so at least. Once he was certain everything had worked like it should and he had hidden the button to their floor on the elevators, he went to retrieve backup plan. The moment it was out, Natasha opened the lid and jumped out at him, hugging him hard. Seeing you suffer like that wasn't easy on her, Bruce said as he followed her out. You knew I would make it through though, didn't you? Harry asked, hugging her back. I mean, I'm still here after all. Natasha looked up at him and asked, was he there? Were you able to put him in stasis before he died? I haven't checked, Harry admitted honestly. I've been a little busy, but that headmaster of yours, Tony said in awe as he followed them out. He's got so much style with his magic. You just point at things and they blow up or change. He makes it look like magic should. Thanks, Tony, Harry said with a bit of a grin. He knew Dumbledore had a flair for these things. I'll try and look cool when I prank you next time. I'm not saying you do a bad job, Tony carried on. It's just so much more impressive. Even the bad guy used more movement and flair. Harry was a spy, if you'll recall, Loki interjected. He was probably trained for minimalistic movements and getting as little attention as he could. Hit wizard, Harry corrected. But he's not wrong. We operated in and out of the mundane world. We needed to do things subtly. Tony, meanwhile, was looking around the penthouse. Man, what year is this again? Look at the size of that TV, he said, pointing at a reasonably large but equally bulky TV sitting in the lounge. June 18, 1996. Harry said instantly. It was hard to forget the day you caused your only remaining family's death. Natasha hugged him again. Bring him out, she insisted. You don't have to wake him, but you do have to know. Harry sighed but nodded. He clicked his fingers and Sirius reappeared next to him. Harry finally looked down at the man. It didn't look good. Sirius' eyes were open and he didn't look like he was breathing, but then he was in stasis. Harry hit his prone form with a stunner and then removed the disc. His eyes were still open and Harry froze. Bruce was instantly on him though, doing chest compressions. He'd resuscitated people before. Harry was white as a sheet, but he just watched as they tried to save the man who had once given him hope for the future, even though it was short-lived. "We need paddles," Bruce demanded. The man was still warm. He felt they had a good chance of saving him, but they needed to get his heart started. Tony tapped his chest plate since his bag was at home, and Iron Man was soon in the house. He kneeled over the body and positioned his hands over the man's chest. "Clear," he demanded, and Bruce made sure he didn't have contact. There was a jolt as Tony allowed the nanites to take power directly from his remote source, which was currently in backup plan. Nothing happened. "Upping voltage and clear," he said again. Sirius' body stiffened again, but the next moment his eyes closed and he started breathing. Bruce quickly checked his vitals. "We've got a steady pulse," he confirmed with a sigh. Then he smiled up at Harry. "You can put him in stasis again," he suggested. Everyone knew that if they saved anyone, they couldn't chance them apparating away, so they had to stay in stasis. Harry was too stunned to respond, so Natasha took the disc from his unmoving fingers and placed it on the man. Sirius was soon in the stasis field again, but he wasn't transported away as Harry had manually summoned him. "You saved him, Harry," she said to him, with a glowing smile as she saw a look in his eyes that she had never seen before. It was like he was a boy again and being told he hadn't just killed his first father figure. Harry was quiet for a long moment before he looked between Bruce and Tony. "You saved him." He quickly stepped to Bruce and hugged him unashamedly. "Thank you," he said before he turned to Tony and approached him too. Tony had sent the suit back but took a step back and held his hand up. "Thanks is enough," he said, but he smiled. He'd seen the shock and the same look Natasha had. He was very happy he had been able to help. Harry had done so much for them, he'd never be able to thank him. This was something small in his mind, even if it seemed it meant the world to Harry. Thanks will never be enough. Harry swore as he closed the distance anyway and hugged his best friend. "You're the best friend anyone could ever have. And don't you forget it," Tony said as he hugged him back for a moment, before he shoved him away. "That's enough," he grumbled good-naturedly. Harry chuckled and allowed it. Then he went to Sirius prone form and sent him back to storage. It really was the safest place he had, besides backup plans' hidden rooms, but he wasn't chancing that either, since someone may have one of those pesky clocks that tells people if someone is alive or dead. He wouldn't put it past Dumbledore to have something like that without anyone's knowledge. Deciding to get his emotions back under control, Harry asked Tony, "So, did any of your tricks work?" Tony suddenly looked disappointed. "No, none of the rune or science-based communications worked. It was always a long shot anyway." Tony denied. "On the bright side, we won't be gone all that long. I bet Pepper is already planning a party." Harry said, "I know she is." Natasha said, "She asked me if they could plan it for the island. I bet Sirius will love that." Harry's smile broadened. "I bet he would," he agreed. "We'll have to give him a bit of time to adjust though. Chances are he'll be reeling at the knowledge that he's in a new reality." Hella was just standing on one side watching everything going on. She didn't fully understand what was going on, but she knew they had brought a man back from the brink of death. She knew also that they would be playing minimalistic roles, while Harry did most of the work. These people who had band together to support her brother were the type of comrades she had wished she could have had as a child. Not subservient followers, but peers in the eyes of their comrade. Everyone brought their own part. Hella felt great joy at the knowledge that he had instantly agreed and welcomed her to join them. She just hoped there'd be something to do for her to be useful and show her own support. Wanda was also quiet. She knew Harry would be giving them a tour of the magical world at some point. He planned on taking them to a place in America, though, so that there would be no chance of it affecting the timeline. Harry still had all his family's millions, and he planned on expanding on his library and adding to his island as well if possible. There were some magical creatures and plants here that had never been seen in their home reality. Not that that had stopped Bruce, but still, Tony knew they had been set up in the hotel for the foreseeable future, so he asked Harry to help him set up his room. When he informed Tony that portals weren't working here, he was disappointed, but it had been expected that some things would work differently here. He had no doubt Harry would find another way to make his portals if there was enough need. In the meanwhile, Harry apparated things around for them to set up their rooms. "So, what's on the list first?" Steve asked. He knew that there would be attacks from the Death Eaters and that many people would die at their hands. They knew they couldn't save everyone. If they made the people that Harry remembered hearing about disappearing before vanish before the Death Eaters could attack, the Death Eaters would know something was going on. He hated it, but he understood they simply couldn't afford to change the timeline before a certain point. "We have the school holiday to get all the resources that we want to take with us," Harry said. They would need to set up a duplicate backup plan first with all the resources it currently held. Bruce and Wanda would be handling the potions, ingredients, and books. Only once their mission was past a certain point, which they called the divergence point, would they be able to start making a difference. "What is your younger self doing this school holiday?" Natasha asked. They were all gathered in the dining room, where Bruce had put together a meal for them with ingredients they had brought along. "I believe I was going through a bit of a rebellious stage, avoiding my minders and sneaking away from where they were watching me. I seem to recall a girl I fancied at a diner in the London Underground," Harry said with a bit of humor. "Was she pretty?" Loki asked, watching Natasha's reaction. It didn't even faze her. She knew people had pasts. "As I recall," Harry nodded. "Unfortunately, by the time I had worked up the courage to speak to her, Dumbledore showed up to take me to the burrow, where my attention was soon on Ginny," he said. "Teenagers," Natasha scoffed. "You're telling me?" Harry laughed. "I recall this time of my life as some of the most emotionally scarring and confusing times. I had nightmares every night, seeing Sirius die over and over, and then when I woke up there were just other things to worry about. Well, if we succeed, you'll finally be able to put that behind you," Bruce said. Harry just nodded and continued his meal. A couple of minutes later he said, "Let's make our way to America tomorrow and go visit one of their magical districts. You all remember the plan, right?" Many people rolled their eyes, but Hela answered, "We will speak to nobody unnecessarily and try to remain inconspicuous." "Yes," Harry agreed. "I doubt anything we do there could cause a major splash that the Prophet would write about, so we'll have relative freedom. You'll be able to explore, but the Americans have strict laws about mundane people never finding out about magic, so if you get caught, you may get in trouble. If you're ever taken or you think you're being followed, you activate your portkeys and come here. We can't afford to take chances." "But portkeys into and out of the country are tracked, aren't they?" Tony asked. "Doesn't matter," Harry said. "The Fidelius is still unbreakable. They'll know our general location then. But I can just relocate us if that happens. Let's try to avoid needing to use the portkeys though." Everyone agreed, and after dinner they all went to their pastimes. Bruce was busy going over the full list of books since Harry had finally given him access to the whole library. He was gleefully making a separate list of things he'd like to read as well, for when they had time and were back home. Harry, Natasha, Tony, Wanda, Hela, Loki, and Steve were busy trying to work on a plan to track the Death Eaters after the final attack on Hogwarts, which would occur a little under 2 years from their current time. Harry didn't plan for them to wait, though. Jarvis' project was a stasis field with a rune-based control that was connected to a magical touchscreen tablet. Harry would set up the field around the penthouse, enter it, and activate it, which would then slow their time so that they could move more quickly through time to do what they planned. The next day, they all entered backup plan again, and Harry activated his glasses so that they could watch the flight. Harry now had a communicator in his ear as well, so they could stay in contact. He lifted up and started flying in the direction Tony indicated for him. Harry was surprised that he could still attain his maximum speed, but attributed it to the fact that he had enchanted the flight capability while he was in the other world. At top speed, Harry reached New York in little over 2.5 hours. He had flown through a couple of spots of bad weather, but being out of phase saved him the discomfort of getting wet. When he landed, Harry was stiff, but he walked to the park across from the magical shopping district and cast a couple of security spells before removing backup plan. "You all have your wands?" Harry asked once they were all out again. He had enchanted a couple of wands with some simple spells and bound them to each person so that it couldn't be used by anyone else. It should read as magical and pass any tests should someone decide to inspect them. They all took out their wands, Tony's extending from inside his sleeve so he could grasp it by some mechanical means. Harry assumed he dedicated some of his nanites to the task. They were just so damn versatile that he could simply design something and have them take that shape. "Good." Harry nodded and turned to the entrance leading them in. He knew this would take long, as they wouldn't be going shopping again until after the divergence point. Everyone had purchased things of interest while they looked out for things that might be useful. They went into every store imaginable and purchased many items, clothing to fit in, tools of the various trades. Tony had even purchased a clock like the Weasleys owned. Harry didn't know how everything was done after all, and that was one of the things he never could quite figure out. Now that he had an example, though, he'd be able to do so. Tony had purchased a whole crate of every flavor beans and many other magical sweets from the sweet shop. If they could figure out the processes and enchantments, they might just be able to open another sort of shop. Wanda had gone to look inside a wand shop and had talked shop with the owner for a bit. He even had her tested for a wand, just as curious as herself if there was a better fit for her. But it turned out none of the wands reacted well for her. There were other focuses as well, like rings with gemstones and a staff or two, but nothing really worked for her. She did purchase a couple of cores though, which the other wand maker sold to her with a smile. He only sold her the stuff that were too difficult for himself to find a resonance with. He had refused to tell her how the rings and staffs worked, stating it was a family secret. She decided that that would be her next project. They had something similar, but it was limited in range. Hella had seen a magical armament shop. It was really just a shop for display weapons, but the armor section had real dragonhide clothes, which were both beautifully made and expensive. She had found a dark green full-length dragon leather coat with a hood that could be pulled over it, which she simply had to have. It was made from the belly of a dragon, so it was soft and flexible. But she was assured that it was still very durable and completely fireproof. That it was lined with a magical silk from an acromantula with an enchantment for comfort was just a bonus that made it twice as expensive. Natasha had found some things she liked there as well and had Harry try on some new boots, most of which she ended up getting, knowing that he was limited in options and had mentioned it. Natasha had even purchased a new dark red dragon leather cloak for Wanda. It would be a surprise for later, though. Harry had found a couple of goblin-made daggers, which he purchased and haggled with the owner a bit, and bought as much already processed dragon leather as he was willing to part with. The acromantula silk was an expensive commodity, and the man refused to sell him any of his but referred him to his supplier. That led them to a clothing store where the owner had been kind enough to sell them a reel of the stuff, but it too was very expensive. It didn't stop there though. They all purchased something to wear that would suit them better and many reels of different weaves of fabric, which Harry thought he could give to Frigga as a gift. That, in turn, inspired Natasha to buy many different kinds of clothes in different styles, which she could also offer Frigga, since she loved to see the different styles of clothing Harry had made on occasion, and had expressed an interest in their design. Loki had delighted in finding a joke shop and had disappeared into it on his own. Harry understood the need. It wouldn't be any fun if everyone knew what he purchased. He'd warned Natasha to take her own soap to the bathroom, though, because he didn't doubt she'd shoot Loki if tadpoles started spawning on her body if she accidentally used frog spawn soap. Their next stop was a second-hand bookstore. Bruce had finally found his heaven. He started piling up books on every subject, since he knew what Harry had already, and by the end of his mission they had spent another large pile of gold. They didn't need to buy books they already owned because Harry would replicate what he needed to put in the other backup plan. That was until Bruce had found another bookstore down a dark alley. It reminded Harry of Nocturne Alley, with the shifty people he saw hanging around in it. They kept on finding more and more interesting things, including a pair of vanishing cabinets. Harry had to have those, so he got them too. All manner of dark enchantments and books on forgotten rituals and magics from ages past soon joined the collection. There was also an apothecary in the dark part of the alley, but Harry convinced Bruce to give it a skip. He'd heard stories about what ingredients one could find in such places and didn't want to expose his friends to things like werewolf saliva or bartled banshee's cry. Accidents that might happen while handling vampire blood were not unheard of either. Instead, they went to a normal apothecary and Bruce purchased a lot of ingredients he either knew they needed or were new to him. Steve had found and entered a store that sold magic paint, which would allow a person to paint pictures that move. He asked Harry nicely, but Harry just laughed and told him to go nuts. He'd not found anything for himself yet, except for a very comfortable and sturdy pair of boots. Harry had also popped into a jeweler to look at what enchantments one could have put on jewelry. There he found a pair of amulets that, when worn by two people, would allow them to feel each other's emotions. He purchased them and a couple of other nifty items which he thought he could reverse engineer to make new magic items himself. The last place they found made Tony very happy. It was a liquor store. They found that there really weren't many different magical drinks, mostly just things that looked strange or had potions in them. Tony had asked the salesperson about things like what they had been making, and he was just pointed towards the fire whiskey. In the end, they didn't get much from the shop, but Harry had seen and purchased a pipe made from the tooth of a dragon. It was carved exquisitely with a moving image of a wolf running around the head of the pipe. He was told that it would howl when smoked and one would see the shape of a wolf at hunt in the smoke. 9 hours after entering, they exited again. Tony was talking excitedly even after the disappointment of the liquor store, and Harry was laughing, while Natasha rolled her eyes at Tony's insistence that Quadpot was perfect for Asgardians, considering how the ball explodes. Nobody else was carrying anything. Harry had simply brought out backup plan and levitated the purchases down to the first room. Trunks with rooms were not unheard of. It was rare, sure enough, but not enough to really draw attention. Harry's storage, however, had caught the eye of one old wizard who simply had to know how he did that. Harry had lied and said it was an illusion to protect where he kept his trunk. The old man had nodded in understanding and walked away with a smile after congratulating him on his ingenuity. They found a quiet place and Harry performed his security magic again, so that everyone could enter backup plan. Harry had no doubt that Bruce would be sorting through the books and ingredients instantly. He'd probably not even come out when they landed if he had his nose in a book when they did so. Fortunately, Harry had remembered to move the darker artifacts to a space that he'd sectioned off. Everyone knew to leave those items alone anyway. When they were all in, Harry flew back to London and their temporary home. They had time still. So Harry went about the duplication of backup plan. It took him a week to create the entire inside as it had been when he arrived in the new reality. Then he and Bruce went about putting what they knew were in there into their proper places. The magical plants they needed would have to be put in later, but by the time the second week was done, they had recreated most of everything. Harry had had to make a couple of trips to museums to make copies of the paintings they had sold at auction, but that was a simple task for him now. He copied his vault room and his stores of stored food and enchanted everything that had been there before. By the time a month had ended, they had finally finished the job. The only thing that needed to still be done was the magical plants and the Fidelius to hide the entrance. That would be done later, though. Once everything was as prepared as they could get it, Harry and Tony set up the rune-induced field generator poles and went back to the lounge. They had spent a couple of hours going through Harry's memories and found a point where they could make a difference, using Harry's new capabilities. They activated the time dilation and watched as the sun rose and set every 10 seconds until the correct date was reached. Then they all got in backup plan again and Harry activated his invisibility and phased out before flying to Bones Manor. So, do we know what time of the day this Bones woman died? Natasha asked over the comms and monitoring Harry from her personal terminal. She had wanted to be by his side but knew only he could do this. Tony had insisted on upping his security though, so everyone now had a seat on a swivel chair through which they could turn to see all around Harry. The enchanting work didn't take a lot of effort, but the illusionary display had taken him a bit longer for the full display feed. No, Harry denied. We do know that the dark mark was seen first and then she was found, so I need to get in there and start my part. Go, Steve said. We've got your back. You really should work on setting up some defenses we can trigger though, just in case someone sneaks up on you, Tony said. He could just imagine Harry stepping into battle and not lifting a finger as all 6 of them used a targeting system combined with the illusionary displays to attack all the foes in his area, even people behind him. We can try and work something out sometime, but we've just stepped into the beginning of the war and I think we'll be a little busy from now on, Harry said as he floated to the manor house. It wasn't a bad idea, honestly. Maybe they should adapt something like that for the ghost squads. It was late evening and the sun had only just set, so Harry was careful. He needed to avoid the wards which he knew were in place. Fortunately, with him out of phase, he moved past the ward without it even detecting him. He found Amelia Bones sitting down to dinner. If the reports were to be believed, she was found in her nightgown, so Harry knew he'd have to wait for her to go to bed. His friends were talking to him, but he didn't respond, since he couldn't even silence his location without the magic being detected by the wards. He followed her around the house, giving her some privacy while she finished some paperwork, by staying in the corner on the far side of her home office and outside the bathroom when she went about her evening ablutions. Once she was in bed, Harry went out through the window to look out at what he could see. Nothing happened for many hours and Harry kept his silent vigil. He was worried that he had somehow changed something already or gotten the date wrong, but shortly before 3 a.m., there was a flash from the wards and Harry felt them go down instantly, followed quickly by another ward going up which would stop apparition and portkeys. He knew those wards well. He hurried back inside and found Amelia having awoken to the ward dropping. She cast a couple of quick detection charms and swore as she realized she had been blocked from escape. Squaring her shoulders, she marched out of the room, having thrown something on over her sleepwear. When she reached the Stairs, there was a crash as her front door was obliterated. When the splinters cleared, Voldemort himself stood in the door. Harry quickly activated his time dilation and started his plan. First, he focused his magic on Amelia and then produced a copy of her, clothes and all, off to the side where neither of them could see it. It was just a conjuration, but Harry soon fixed that with his intent magic. It took him a while, but he was able to complete the job in under a minute, his time. He instantly turned the body invisible and had it hover next to himself. Then he slowly allowed time to speed up. He needed to know the exact moment the woman would die so that he could replace her with the copy. This was the only way to keep the timeline intact. If people died originally, they'd have to die again. One way or the other, they needed to be taken out of the fight. So she'd be joining Sirius in stasis if Harry was able to do what he had planned. In slow motion, the confrontation seemed to drag forever. At first they talked and Amelia proved her worth by not once showing fear to the monster. Then they started exchanging spells. Harry watched in fascination as they acted and reacted to each other. He noticed for the first time that Tom was using multiple spells at once. While he let one spell fly, he was already preparing to cast the next, and its power was visibly gathering as he did so. But if it was in real time, you'd have to look very hard and you couldn't notice it while you were fighting him because you were focused on what he was already doing to you. That explained why he was so flashy as well. Like a magician, he drew your attention from what he was doing by making a show of it. Harry was still watching the fight, modifying the body he had waiting as Amelia received wounds for her resistance, when he noticed a familiar buildup of green energy. Apparently, Amelia had taken enough of his valuable time and he was preparing to end it. Harry stood at the ready and awaited the spell as he slowed time to his maximum capability. When the killing curse left Voldemort's wand, Harry looked at Amelia's current position and moved the body to take a similar stance. He watched as the unblockable spell moved right through her shield, and just before it hit her body, he performed a switching spell, bringing her out of phase and making her invisible and placing the replica in her place. She was still slow from his perspective, so the stunning spell he touched her with left her looking like she was still awake. Even as the killing curse hit the copy and started falling back, Harry allowed time to regain speed as he watched Tom smile for his success. Voldemort had been tired of the Aurors trying to find his people and wanted their spirit broken, so he decided to pay the head of the DMLE a visit. Her wards were simple for him to break and he had already trapped her, so he walked casually to her door and blasted it to pieces. Amelia Bones looked down at him from her second-floor landing and he smirked up at her. Then the usual conversation happened. Why did they always say he would never win? He had returned from the dead after all. Obviously he'd win. He couldn't be stopped. When the fight started, he was surprised she could keep up with him, but for every attack she threw at him, she had to block 3 times. When he had enough entertainment, having seen several broken bones and cuts on her face and body, he sent a killing curse and finished the job he had set out for. She fell to the floor anticlimactically and lay there dead. He walked up to her body and saw the vacant eyes he had seen so many times. Her face was all wrong though. He had hoped it would show shock or fear, but it was just blank almost. Peaceful, he sighed, turned around and left. Such a waste of a pureblood. With that done, Harry put the real woman in stasis and moved her into storage. He decided to stay to ensure the Aurors though her dead and watched as they came upon the body minutes later, noting the wand in her hand which Harry had also switched. Harry lifted out of the house and went back to their place. Once there, he took out backup plan and Natasha was the first one out, hugging him instantly. How did they know she was attacked? Tony asked. Her house was probably watched by Aurors that work for the other side. Harry said with closed eyes as he hugged his wife. The enemy has infiltrated the protecting authorities. Hela asked next out. That does not bode well for the people, but it does explain why they showed up so quickly. Harry nodded as the last few people got out, before he put backup plan away again. Are you sure we can't just go look for these Horcrux things? Steve asked. He really didn't want to wait for all the damage these people were going to cause. We've discussed this, Steve. Tony said, if we interfere in certain things, it would affect the timeline and we'd not be able to follow our knowledge anymore. Doing the things we're doing now ensures our ability to act on our knowledge when the time comes. It's not easy for us either, you know, Bruce said. Steve nodded after a moment. He knew what was coming would only get worse. He looked at Harry as he was once again hugging Natasha. How could he even bear it, knowing what these people would do? I like to think of it as us saving an entire world. Harry said, it's not easy to watch people die. We'll save as many as we can, but we won't be able to save everyone. It was a somber group of people who went for a bit of food and a rest. They'd be activating the stasis again soon, but after the long wait through the night, many of them were quite tired. The next day they had their next target to save and time was moved forward again. Hannah Abbott's mother had refused to help the Death Eaters and were killed for it. Harry went, with his team supporting him again, and saved the woman as well. The process was much the same, except that there was a torture session the woman had to endure first. It was torturous for Harry to stand there and let it happen. Everyone was quiet as well. The Death Eaters had exposed their identities, and a list was being made of people who would have to pay for their sins before they would be allowed to die. Harry was considering building a new prison on Niflheim just for them. When they returned that night, they went to rest again, but the next morning a new plan was formed. They would not be able to sit through something like that again. Fortunately, the next person on their list was not going to be all that difficult. Albus Dumbledore. They moved forward again and Harry had them all in backup plan again. This time they apparated to Hogsmeade and Harry was able to fly them through the wards at Hogwarts. They were quite comprehensive and for a moment it felt like they would resist him, but he was allowed to pass through after a moment. Harry knew that his younger self had the Marauders map, but fortunately he was not in Hogwarts at the time. He couldn't remember if he checked the map after they returned from the cave, but didn't want to be caught, so he resolved to make his way out as soon as possible, once his job was complete. They watched as Harry and Dumbledore appeared and Dumbledore ordered him to hide. Malfoy disarmed Dumbledore and Snape sent his killing curse at his mentor and closest friend. This time Harry did notice a flicker of regret crossing Snape's face. He wasn't a nice man, but he wasn't a bad guy. Harry did his thing and had to spend an extra couple of moments studying Dumbledore's arm to emulate the effects of the curse. It was a nasty one, but he had no doubt he'd be able to save the old man with an overuse of power or possibly a replacement arm. Harry then fled the scene without waiting for the body to hit the base of the tower and returned them home again. The next time they would be stepping into was the day Harry was rescued from his home, just before Bill and Fleur's wedding and Harry's birthday. They arrived in Privet Drive and watched as Harry's family drove off to go into hiding. So those are the people who should have cared for you? Loki asked. That's them. Harry agreed. Did you ever see them after this again? Tony asked. No, I didn't need to go back. The protections on the house soon disappeared anyway. Harry said, do me a favor and place a tracking charm on their car. Loki insisted. Can't. Harry denied. Any magic I do right now, before I reach 17, will be tracked. They'll think it was my younger self. Then put one of mine on the car. Tony insisted. If you never see any of these people again, you won't have to worry about us paying them a visit later. Harry smirked at the idea. It made sense, but he'd have to just find out where they went for now, rather not tempt fate. Fine, but leave Dudley alone. At least he was trying to be nice to me in the last couple of weeks. I see no problem with that, Loki said. It is admirable that he came to his senses on his own, too. I agree, Hella said. It shows he's got character and that there's a little of you in him. Perhaps the last good thing from your mother's line that made it to the boy. Harry had to agree to that. Dudley would never be the sharpest knife in the drawer. No, he'd more likely be a spoon, but at least he had tried. Considering his parents' persistent attitude and the way they raised him, it was quite admirable that he'd go against their wishes to try and be nice to him. Harry placed the tracker and returned to his younger incarnation's side. Then they waited. Just after dark, the order turned up. Harry watched as his friends arrived and he couldn't help his smile at seeing them alive again. He had one priority today and someone he'd like to try and save. Alastor Moody was the priority. Hedwig would be nice, but he'd shed all his tears for his old owl. If he could save her after Alastor, it would be a nice bonus though. So they followed Moody as he flew off on his specialized broom. Tony mentioned that it looked cool, the way the old man sat back in reasonable comfort. Harry had no doubt he'd need to make Tony a new broom at some point. When the attack came, Mundungus Fletcher, the coward that he was, didn't even wait to see the enemy. He simply apparated out. Harry had to wait for a spell to almost hit Moody from the back, when he proved too difficult for the enemy to face directly. The man was full of piss and vinegar as he grinned an evil grin and happily took on all comers. Harry's respect for the man, which had always been high, went up just a notch. When the spell came, Harry replaced him and flew off directly after where he knew his younger self and Hagrid would be. He arrived just in time to see the killing curse inch its way to Hedwig as she flew in its path to save Harry. Harry quickly replaced her as well, and a little part of his childhood was safe. He knew that some of the others would be hurt, but he couldn't help them, so he left again. This was what they did for several days, knowing that Harry's younger self was desperately trying to find and destroy every Horcrux. When the final battle came, they were there as well. By this point, they had saved quite a few people, including Rufus Scrimgeour, Ted Tonks and Dobby, but Harry knew the final battle would be difficult. So many people died there, but he was concerned with a few of them specifically, and he didn't know exactly when they died. So he'd be living through the whole thing in slow motion, as he tried to save them all. They took a couple of days to prepare, and Harry spent most of his time in meditation to steady himself. He knew he couldn't save them all, but he needed to wait until a certain point when he could act. The younger Harry had to fulfill the prophecy first. When the time came, Harry went to Hogwarts and started on his mission. Everyone was at their stations and ready. There were 7 more people on Harry's list to save, and he'd need to stay on mission. 20 grueling hours of slowed time, and Harry was tired as hell. He'd finally gotten them all, ending with Snape. That was a bit more tricky as the man had been bitten several times by Nagini, but Harry had administered a couple of Phoenix tears and stored the man away, as he had with Fred, Remus, Tonks, and even Lavender Brown. He'd almost decided not to save Colin Creevey, but had relented. When Steve informed him that under no circumstances could he doom an innocent boy to death, no matter how annoying he was. When the younger Harry snuck out of the castle to go to his death, Harry went with him. The younger Harry would be summoning his parents and Remus and Sirius with the Resurrection Stone. Harry had to emulate what he remembered them doing and saying. While younger Harry was looking at Sirius, Harry noted his parents both looking at him. Where he was flying invisibly and James winked at him. Of course they could see him. When the younger Harry dropped the Resurrection Stone, Harry levitated it up and without touching it, dropped it into a pocket. That would be useful later. Then he went to set up a little trap. With it in place, they could start on the next part of the plan as soon as the necessary happened. Harry waited invisibly, as Voldemort and his troops entered the school one last time an hour later. Hagrid was carrying the younger Harry's lifeless body, and the crowd gathered while Harry waited for the duel. There were some touching words and a bit of defiance, and then the younger Harry made his move. It was a short while later, when Neville had destroyed the final Horcrux, when Harry's younger incarnation finally ended the fight with a disarming charm of all things. The Death Eaters that saw his fall apparated and poured it out instantly, never even noticing the magical field that they moved through to escape. Finally, Harry let out a sigh of relief. "It's finally time," he whispered to himself, knowing that his friends could hear him. "We've still got some work to do," Steve said sternly over his comm. "Of course," Loki interjected, "but now we can start being useful." He was specifically thinking about Harry's aunt and uncle. He had not yet been allowed to do anything about them. "Do we need to do anything here anymore?" Natasha asked. "Not that I can think of," Harry said. Just as the younger Harry and Ginny kissed as passionately as a young couple could while in front of her parents, he knew that didn't last. Unfortunately, it didn't stop him from feeling sad for the girl. He remembered her dying defiantly, still holding out hope that Harry would win and come for her when he was done. Harry took off and went back to their place where he would finally let the team out. They didn't stay there long, however. They apparated to the Albanian forest, where Harry had once tracked Voldemort's latest and final Horcrux. Voldemort was already being reborn again, he knew, but he was weak. Harry knew he needed a Death Eater nearby to call his remaining followers, so he would not be calling on them anytime soon. Voldemort could not believe he had lost to that brat. Again, this time when he had his strength, he'd get his vengeance on the world. He couldn't come out of the shadows again, not with only one Horcrux. He had made Charity Burbage's skull into his last Horcrux. The Muggle-loving idiot would never know the honor he had bestowed on her. It wasn't easy, with how many pieces of his soul he'd already split off, but he'd finally managed, and then he set up a return plan. He would not spend years as a wraith again while his followers did nothing. He lay on the ground, recovering from his rebirth, breathing heavily. When he was mostly recovered, he felt something. He was not alone. Nobody should be able to be here, not with his protections up. He calmed himself and slowly stood up. "Cover yourself, man. There are ladies present," a voice said from off to the side, as whoever it was conjured some gray robes on him. Voldemort looked up instantly and was shocked to see 8 profiles. Most of them looked strange. There was some sort of metal construct with glowing eyes, 2 women with green and red cloaks, a man with long black hair and a black cloak, a muggle-looking fellow with casual clothing and brown hair, a man dressed all in blue with a shield bearing a star, another red-headed woman wearing black body armor with a jacket and a belt, and finally a man in full dragonhide armor with a hood and mask coming to just under his eyes. The one with the hood had spoken, but he could see no wand in his hand. The woman in red carried 2, but none of the others had any out. The brunette man had one in his pocket, though, which he could see sticking out. "Why are you here?" Voldemort asked as he slowly started walking to where he had left a spare wand. Nobody impeded his movement. "Who are you?" "We're here to kill you, Tom," Harry said, dropping his hood and mask. "You aren't him," Voldemort denied, even though his eyes showed shock. "Actually, he is," Natasha said as she smirked at the man. "Not the one you know, but still." "What are you talking about, Muggle?" Voldemort spat, having spotted her guns mere toys in his mind. "Harry Potter is nothing more than a child who won by luck when he faced me earlier today." "He's not wrong," Harry said conversationally. "I was kind of prone to trust in my luck at that age. You're not that boy anymore," Hela assured. "You are now a god and king of incredible power. To compare you to this tainted creature would be impossible. You have better taste now, too." Natasha said with a smirk. I don't know about being a god, but he is powerful. Steve conceded, though I still think I could beat you in a fair fight. He added with a smirk. Voldemort had finally reached his wand and quickly aimed it at them. You should have taken your chance while you had it. He sneered at them, quickly casting a killing curse at the man in the armor. It didn't reach him as the man with the shield moved quickly and blocked it. Impossible, the killing curse cannot be blocked, yet our companion just did so. Hela said. She turned to Harry. Would you mind if I teach him to respect his betters, brother? Just don't kill him. Harry nodded. I can't finish him off if his soul escapes. Hela smiled at him. Of course, brother, I would not take your chance from you, she assured him as she walked to the man who cast another killing curse, only for it to be caught in her bare hand when she moved faster than he could see. She held the spell and looked at it, its power arching and sparking, trying to actually touch her. Interesting, she said before making the spell disappear. Then she closed the last of the distance and started beating the shit out of him. Are you sure we cannot take him back with us? Loki asked with a smile. Our father would love to have a word or two with him. I'd love to see him fed water from your island's pool of eternity, just to have him banished from the island for all time. Hela said as she continued punching the man while holding him aloft with one arm. No greater torture could exist. Loki agreed. Appropriate, good plan, Hela. I'm afraid I cannot claim to have thought of it. Hela said as she dropped the man, only to drop kick him into a wall where he lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Logan once threatened me thus. Is that when you started sniffing around him? Natasha asked with a bit of a smile as Harry went to heal the man so that Loki could pin him up for them. Harry didn't like torture, but with the cave sealed off and all magical means of escape blocked, he could enjoy what they were doing to the man who had sentenced him to a life of hell just for a bit. I wouldn't describe it thus. Hela disagreed, though I do envy May Parker for the time he makes for her, even though I respect her too. Harry pointed at Loki and then Voldemort, enervating the monster with the point. Loki caught on instantly. Oh, this is going to be fun, he said with an evil smirk. He summoned 2 daggers and drove them through his shoulders and pinned him to the cave of the wall. A little application of intent and he stayed there. What are you people? Voldemort asked after he had yelled in pain and tried to escape with nothing happening. Everyone looked at Harry, who shrugged. Maybe we should introduce ourselves, Harry suggested. He really should know who took him out, though I don't want to make this a habit. Bad guys like to talk and they tend to lose because of it. He looked at Tom suddenly and realized he was channeling magic, even though he'd lost his wand while Hela had beat on him. Tom lifted his hand and blew over it. A gout of flame spewed forth as fiendfire was unleashed on the interlopers. When he was certain they must be dead, he forced his will on the living flame to snuff it. When it was gone, he realized he had miscalculated. They were all just standing there looking at him. How are you doing that? He demanded. Magic, Harry said with a smile, though you just cost yourself an introduction. He turned to his friends. What do you think? Kill him here or take him with us? Most of his friends wanted to present him to Odin for the justice he deserved. Steve and Bruce wanted him to die so that it could just be over. Harry wanted him dead as well, but he remembered his father's fervor when he spoke of the punishment he'd bestow on the man who cost Harry everything. In the end, Harry decided to place him in stasis and then storage along with his Horcrux. He made sure he was knocked out first, though. No chance of him waking up and somehow breaking stasis in the meanwhile. The cave was barren of any kind of magical knowledge, so they knew they'd need to continue looking, since they still needed to find the ritual Voldemort had originally planned to use after he had destroyed the world. They went back home after that. They still had the cleanup to do after all, but first, Harry needed to rest again. Natasha put him to bed but told him she'd be going over the globe, which Harry had enchanted to track the Death Eaters. Harry nodded, but was already asleep by the end of the action. He'd never been out of phase, invisible, and using time dilation as much as he had that day, and he was physically and mentally exhausted. Having been on guard for the entirety of their encounter with Tom, while being so tired and acting casual was very stressful for him too. Logically, he had known that the man could still pose a threat to his friends. But he had worked with the Avengers long enough to know how to break an opponent's spirit. He slept for a long time, and by the time he woke up, he felt hungry and thirsty. He got up and made his way to the living room. Imagine his surprise when he found the team sitting around the living room and chatting with 30-odd people in stasis fields lying on the floor. "What the hell happened while I was sleeping?" Harry exclaimed. Tony smirked at him. "You were sleeping and we've been itching to do something. Seriously, it's been weeks since I've been able to break out my suit." "Were you careful?" Harry asked. When Tony winced and looked up at the screen, Harry saw a picture of the Iron Man suit that had been taken by what appeared to be a novice. "Fortunately, people are calling it a hoax," Natasha said as she got up to hug her husband. "The technology of this time period simply doesn't allow for better quality." "Are these all Death Eaters?" Harry asked as he looked between the people and noticed a couple of faces he knew. "They were all on your tracking artifact," Hela confirmed, pointing off to the side where an enchanted earth ball floated and turned slightly with little pinpricks of light scattered throughout Europe. "How did you sleep?" Bruce asked. "I know you spent a lot of power yesterday." "I'm actually feeling pretty damn good," Harry said with a smile. It was true, he'd slept very well knowing the madman was finally stopped. His world was finally safe. "Now we just need to round up the rest," Tony said with a grin of his own, and that's what they did for the next 2 days. Most of the team were frustrated that there wasn't much to do, but Natasha was able to help him as she was the stealthiest of them all. Harry could take out a lot of people at once and had to set up the wards to prevent escape, but sometimes he needed an extra person to help pick off the stragglers. When they were done, only one family remained. The Malfoys, cowards that they were. They never left their mansion, and it was protected by a Faudelius. Harry had no doubt that they had a stockpile of food and possibly a new house elf. He was loath to do what he was about to, but he had no choice, so he brought out Dobby. When Dobby awoke, he saw that he was surrounded by people, all looking at him. "Who is you being?" he asked. That's when he focused on the one who felt familiar to him. It took him a moment, but finally realized who it was. "Harry Potter, sir." "Hi, Dobby," Harry said with a smile. "It's been a long time," he said. "Has it?" Dobby asked. "It's been a couple of years." Harry confirmed, "For me at least." "Hello, Dobby," Natasha said. "Harry always says good things about you." The others all nodded. It was true. Harry hadn't talked about the little guy much, but when he did, it was always with a fond smile and just a bit of sadness. Dobby cocked his head to the side and asked, "Who is you, miss?" "I'm Natasha Potter, Harry's wife," Natasha said. "But I though," Dobby trailed off. "Many things happened, Dobby, and we'd love to discuss it, but for now we need your help." Harry said. "What can Dobby do for the great Harry Potter, sir?" Dobby asked. "We need you to take us into Malfoy Manor." Harry said. "You can't," Dobby said, shaking his head. "The Dark Lord goes there. Don't worry about Voldemort," Harry said with a smile. "He's never going to bother anyone ever again. Harry already defeated him." Bruce said. "I'm Bruce Banner, by the way. It really is nice to meet one of Harry's friends." "Thank you, sir. You are kind to a house elf to call him a friend of the great Harry Potter," Dobby said with some tears spilling down his face. "I'll take you, but you must promise not to get hurt," Dobby demanded. After that, it was a simple process to bring in the last of the Death Eaters. Once everyone was captured, Harry left interrogation to the others. He really wasn't too keen on hearing all the horrible things they had done. With their home secure, Loki and Hela led the interrogations. with Tony having his AI transcribe their confessions and Bruce supplying the Veritaserum. Wanda was off procuring the needed magical plants, and Harry and Natasha was planning on a gathering for a couple of reunions. Loki and Hela knew to ask about ritual magic and to ask for any information that may be useful. If Loki had any say in it, Harry's restricted section would grow twice over. With the Death Eaters giving all their secrets, there was no doubt that that would happen. Dobby was thanked for his help and asked if he would like to work for Harry. They'd needed to give him some more information after Dobby noticed that the Malfoys looked the same as he remembered, but he had the standard reaction of instantly promising to keep the great Harry Potter's secrets when he proved that he was who he said he was. With that sorted, Harry and Natasha went to Australia to look for Wendell and Monica Wilkins, aka Hermione's parents, who she had obliviated and memory charmed. In their original time, Hermione had never gone to retrieve them when the Death Eaters started attacking again. Harry still didn't know if that was under the orders of Voldemort or if they had acted on their own after they had crippled the British wizarding world, but he wouldn't let that happen again. It didn't take them long to find the couple, and Harry's skills helped him recover their memories quickly. That was all they had planned, but they did offer transport to the couple back home. They weren't allowed too far into backup plan, but a couple of hours later, Harry had dropped them off at home. They had promised to keep Harry's secret since they were both indebted to him and he had mentioned time travel. They were intelligent people and understood there could be consequences, even if they didn't know what they were. Harry didn't stick around for the reunion. Instead, he apparated himself and Natasha back to the apartment where the interviews were still ongoing. The idea was to hand the people over to the DMLE in secret. Only the head of the DMLE would know where they came from. Their signed confessions were the only thing standing between them and Hela's blade. It was necessary. Those who refused signed their own death warrant.